Look at that. Son of a bitch. All right. Apologize. I swear I had this fixed. It's always something, isn't it? All right, just a second. Just a second. That's better. Oh, and now you can see over here. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Xenon here in the His House. Hope everyone is doing great. We made it to Saturday. Hope everyone's week went well. Mine was just fine. I've been spending probably my last 2 weeks of evenings reading a book. I've been reading a Dan Brown novel. I've been reading Origin. I'll throw this in here for you. It's his 5th book in his kind of the Da Vinci Code series, starring Robert Langdon. So I read that. It was pretty interesting. I found out about this from some research I was doing on entropy and the beginning of life and all that sort of stuff. So I finished that last night, and then I stayed up way too late reading it. I stayed up until almost midnight. I've been trying to get to bed by about 10:30, but I was so close to finishing it, and it just kept going. And so it was almost midnight before I got to bed, and I'm tired today, especially because the medication I'm taking to help me sleep really doesn't like me staying up late. But I stayed up late to finish this, and then now I'm moving on to this book. This is actually the book before it. This is Inferno. My parents, there's a movie out for this one already, and I have not seen it yet. I kept telling my parents I wanted to read Dante's Inferno, which is what this is based on, and have the knowledge to understand what's happening in the books. The previous 3 books I had already spent a whole bunch of time studying religion, so I really knew what was going on in the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and the Lost Code or the Lost Symbol or whatever it was. So yeah, this is going to be my evening reading from here on out, so I can finish the 4th book. Yeah, all right. So, and my birthday is coming up. It's the 16th, so I've taken the week off. And typically what I do for my birthdays is I read, because I read and write, because I usually don't have a whole lot of time to do that. So what I'm planning on reading is this book. It's like 700 pages. It's The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. And it is written by the esteemed David Graeber, and late David Graeber, and who's an anthropologist, and David Wengrow, who is an archaeologist. This is going to talk about kind of how the concept that all hunter-gatherers were egalitarian, and as soon as we get to farming, everything goes to hell in a handbasket isn't exactly 100% correct. So this very much dovetails into what I am writing. I'm writing something talking about that very thing. So hopefully I can get through this in my week of vacation. And if I can get through that, this will be the other book that I will try to read. It is Every Life is on Fire, How Thermodynamics Explains the Origins of Living Things. This is based on entropy. This is Jeremy England. England is mentioned in the book Origins over here, because there's talking about the origin of life and his experimentation and some other stuff, that life could spontaneously happen if the right conditions were there, based on entropy and syntropy and that sort of thing. So this is his book that we're talking about, I think, his research on that sort of thing. So that's what I'll be doing on my vacation the week of the 16th, starting with this book and going over to this one. Light reading, I know. Normally I don't do any light reading like this here, but I was doing my research on entropy and syntropy, which brought me to this. I read this, and now I'm going to finish this one. Normally my light reading is done during walks. My walks around the neighborhood, but I haven't been doing those for months. And typically there I'll listen to a Star Wars book, and I haven't done that in months, and I really need to get back into it because I'm really feeling it. Let's see what else. So Sunday we're gonna go see our friends who we're going prior to COVID every Wednesday for gaming night. but we haven't seen them in a very long time. So we're gonna go see them on Sunday, and then for a few hours, we're gonna play some games. And then we'll have game night with the guys. That's Dungeons and Dragons. We're doing Spelljammer, which is awesome. So we'll be doing that on Sunday. Then Monday we'll be going to our friends again. Whoop! What did I do? For Halloween. So we'll be going there. Yeah, that's pretty much all that's happening with me. Got some books. Read this. Gonna start this. And hopefully get through this too. So this one is 200 pages. Almost 300 pages, so I don't know if I'll be able to get through both of these books, because it's almost 1,000 pages of reading. Maybe if I get done with this, which I doubt I will. 480 pages, Jesus. Okay, so this is about 2 weeks of reading as well. So, yeah, no, I won't. It's not gonna happen. So, that's what's happening with me. Wait, what do I do? No, I don't. Okay. All right. All right. Questions, comments, suggestions before we get started here. We're gonna start with Elon Musk and his buyout of Twitter. We've got 2 articles here on that. I'm sure will be interesting. Change this back. All right. How's the music? Is the music okay? Too loud? Let me know if it is, and then we'll get started on this. All right. So this is from The Verge. This is from yesterday. Became official. Elon Musk did buy out Twitter. Now let's see what people have to say about it. This is from The Verge. All right, you fucked up real good, kiddo. Twitter's a disaster clown car company that is successful despite itself, and there is no possible way to grow users and revenue without making a series of enormous compromises that will ultimately destroy your reputation and possibly cause grievous damage to your other companies. I say this with utter confidence because the problems with Twitter are not engineering problems, they are political problems. Twitter, the company, makes very little interesting technology. The tech stack is not the valuable asset. The asset is the user base. Hopelessly addicted politicians, reporters, celebrities, and other people who should know better but keep posting anyway. You, Elon Musk, are addicted to Twitter. You're the asset. You just bought yourself for $44 billion. The problem when the asset is people is that people are intensely complicated, and trying to regulate how people behave is historically a miserable experience, especially when that authority is vested in a single powerful individual. What I mean is that you are now the king of Twitter, and people think that you personally are responsible for everything that happens on Twitter now. It also turns out that absolute monarchs usually get murdered when shit goes sideways. Here's some examples. You can write as many polite letters to advertisers as you want, but you cannot reasonably expect to collect any meaningful advertising revenue if you do not promise those advertisers brand safety. That means you have to ban racism, sexism, transphobia, and all kinds of other speech that is totally legal in the United States, but reveals people to be total assholes. So you can make all the promises about free speech you want, but the dull reality is that you still have to ban a bunch of legal speech if you want to make money. And when you start doing that, your creepy new right-wing fanboys are going to viciously turn on you just like they turn on every other social network that realizes the same essential truth. Actually, there's a step before trying to get the ad money. It turns out that most people do not want to participate in horrible, unmoderated internet spaces full of shitty racists and not all men fedora bullies. This is why Twitter is so small compared to its peers. What most people want from social media is to have nice experiences and to feel validated all the time. They want to live at Disney World. So if you want more people to join Twitter and actually post tweets, you have to make the experience much more pleasant, which means moderating more aggressively. Again, every alternative social network has learned this lesson the hard way, like over and over and over again. You got Parler, right? Parler. Truth Social. Yep, well, that's all Donald Trump. And Parler. Yep. Also, everyone crying about freedom of free speech conveniently ignores that the biggest threat to free speech in America is the fucking government, which seems completely bored of the First Amendment. They're out here banning books, Elon. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump have identical policy positions on Section 230, and they both want to repeal it. Do you know why? Because the First Amendment prohibits them from making explicit speech regulations, so they keep threatening to repeal the law that allows social networks to even exist in order to exert indirect pressure on content policy. It's not subtle. State governments are even less subtle. Both Texas and Florida have passed speech regulations that overtly tell social media companies how to moderate, in open hostility to the First Amendment. Figuring out how to comply with these laws is not an engineering problem, not least because compliance might be impossible. It is a legal problem because these laws are blatantly unconstitutional, and the only appropriate response to them is to tell the government to shut up and go away. Big problem here is that the courts are pretty stupid about the internet. A challenge to these laws, partially funded by Twitter, is headed to the Supreme Court, which is the polar opposite of a predictable system. It is a group of uncool weirdos with lifetime appointments that can radically reshape American life however it wants. You can't deploy AI at this problem. You have to go out and defend the actual First Amendment against the bad laws of Texas and Florida, whose taxes you like and whose governors you seem pretty fond of. Are you ready for what that looks like? Are you ready to sit before Congress and politely decline to engage in their content capture sessions for hours on end? Are you ready to do any of this without the incredibly respected policy experts whose leader you first harassed and then fired? This is what you signed up for. It's way more boring than rockets, cars, and rockets with cars on them. And it gets worse the second you leave the United States. Germany is a huge market for Tesla. Are you going to flout Germany's speech laws? I would bet not. The Indian government basically demands social media companies provide potential hostages in order to operate in that country. You can't engineer your way out of that shit. Are you ready to experience the pressure Twitter faces in the Middle East to block and restrict accounts? Are you ready for the fact that the Iranian government will fucking murder people over their social media posts? Are you ready for how Twitter is being used by Iranians protesting that government right now? Are you excited for the Chinese government to find ways to threaten Tesla's huge business in that country over content that appears on Twitter? Because it's going to happen. Yeah, well. The essential truth of every social network is that the product is content moderation, and everyone hates people who decide how content moderation works. Content moderation is what Twitter makes. It is the thing that defines the user experience. It's what YouTube makes, it's what Instagram makes, it's what TikTok makes. They all try to incentivize good stuff, disincentivize bad stuff, and delete the really bad stuff. You know why YouTube videos are all 8 to 10 minutes long? Because that's how long a video has to be to qualify for a second ad slot in the middle. That's content moderation, baby. YouTube wants a certain kind of video and it created incentives to get it. That's the business you're in now. The longer you fight it or pretend that you can sell something else, the more Twitter will drag you into the deepest possible muck of defending indefensible speech. And if you turn on a dime and accept that growth requires aggressive content moderation and pushing back against government speech regulations around the country and the world, well, we'll see how your fans react to that. Anyhow, welcome to hell. This was your idea. There you go. There's the first one from The Verge, and here's the next one here from Mashable. All right, this is from yesterday. The previous post was from yesterday as well. Musk's Twitter takeover isn't going the way you think. The new owner talked a big game to his fan base, but he's already dodging regulators and backing down from the big questions. Judging by the stands that cluster in his replies, Elon Musk's $44 billion buyout of Twitter was a scene out of a Marvel movie. Never mind Iron Man, they posted pictures of Musk as Captain America. After this hero fired 4 people, they also gleefully posted pictures of Musk as Thanos. Perhaps forgetting that Thanos caused untold damage and was ultimately defeated once the planet's most powerful defenders banded together against him. "The bird is freed," Musk tweeted. It was Orwellian language from someone who just took a public company and stuffed it into a private cage. The bird is not free. The bird is shackled to a consortium that includes Musk, banks, fellow billionaires, and various Saudi investors. Whatever happens to the bird next, whether it lives or dies, is less in Musk's court than anyone thinks. Still, the bird stuff sounded super heroic to the stands, many of whom were agitating for the freedom of banned accounts, like certain ex-president who used Twitter to help incite a coup. Musk had said in May that he'd restore Trump's account. Musk, as we're all starting to learn by now, says a lot of things to a lot of people. Soon enough, Musk's tweets started to sound less Avengers, more The Hangover. The supposed troll savior announced a content moderation council with widely diverse viewpoints would be formed prior to any major content decisions or account reinstatements. So much for anyone expecting a Trump reinstatement before the midterms. He made vague, "I'll be digging into it" promises on the perennial vague complaint shadow banning to a Trump supporting account named Cat Turd, as if he were a bored customer service rep and not the billionaire owner. Musk is all carnival barker and no bite. All right, one moment. I'm actually gonna sit down. I have to lower my desk here. All right, that's better. I'm tired from last night from reading. Musk is all carnival barker, no bite. And as for those supposed firings, the 75% of the company that Musk had talked tough about removing, beyond the immediate removal of CEO Parag Agrawal and 3 other executives, no other oustings have been announced. Bloomberg and CNBC were taken in by a couple of pranksters claiming to be just fired data engineers outside Twitter HQ, though. Musk, a teenage boy at heart, later saluted the pranksters who gave his name as Ligma. Okay. Guess we'll wait and see if Mr. Let the Good Times Roll actually aims to make it rain pink slips at the holidays. But at least for now, it seems that Musk, a seasoned showman since his early Twitter days, is a carnival barker, no bite. But here's the thing, no matter what happens now, Musk is going to run headlong into reality, regulators, and simple business sense. He overpaid for Twitter, couldn't find a way to back out of the deal, and now he must make money, or risk the wrath of his fellow investors. Social media experts cannot foretell what will happen next, but they do seem to believe Musk has bitten off a more complex political problem than he can chew. I think Elon Musk has made a huge mistake making himself the global face of content moderation at a critical moment of struggle with governments while maintaining massive personal exposure to challenging countries, which is the previous article we read was pretty much talking about that, right? Running a global content company with no prior experience is difficult, especially when investors are breathing down your neck and sophisticated government influence operations are everywhere. It means not spooking advertisers who Musk preemptively courted by promising Twitter obviously cannot become a free-for-all hellscape, you think? It means not annoying the majority of users who just want the Nazis to be banned and stay banned, some of whom are threatening to make the platform worthless as Tumblr after Yahoo bought it. And it means not courting a revolt by the employees who actually run the shiny machinery you just bought. Oh yeah, and it means playing nice with the European Union. With 450 million people, the EU has more potential Twitter users and Tesla buyers than the United States. And it has much stricter laws safeguarding internet users' rights. Those accept cookies pop-ups you keep getting, which in theory cut down on the number of companies tracking you, largely the doing of the EU regulation known as GDPR. Now here comes the Digital Services Act, which just received final approval from the EU Parliament and Council. The DSA sets standards for content moderation, aims to fight disinformation, and was praised by Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen as the gold standard for keeping social media giants in check with minimal regulation. European Commissioner Thierry Breton reminded Musk and his DSA obligations immediately after the Twitter sale went through. The bird will fly by our rules, and Musk had no response. Not even his classic bomb-throwing LOL emoji. How could he? He's in a video with Breton announcing their joint support for the DSA back in May. Oh, that's funny. And what's Musk going to do if he gets on the wrong side of the European law? Will every Twitter server out of an entire continent that also buys his overpriced electric cars? Seasoned Euro watchers are already preparing the popcorn. Oh. Away. Tweet by Nicholas Vinokur. Europe and Musk won't mix. He says the platform will abide by the law of the land, but how familiar is he with Europe's laws, including the DSA, to force him to have X number of content moderators? Oh, that's interesting. Clash seems unavoidable. To recap, then a billionaire with a habit of founding or pretending to found new companies got addicted to Twitter. He became so intoxicated by the validation he bought the platform at huge cost. He had a simplistic libertarian view of free speech and a blind spot for hate speech and the laws against it. He told friends he was going to fire thousands of workers. He told bankers he was going to hire thousands of workers to create more value. He walked into the offices, made a dad joke, hung around chatting, fired 4 big names to appease his horde. Then as reality set in and he was reminded that laws and regulations exist, he decided to punt the content moderation question to a committee, just as Zuckerberg found himself doing with the oversight board, which itself punted on the big Trump ban question. Turns out running a social media company isn't as easy as it looked before the takeover. Musk may soon get bored with this complicated new toy, wary of turning off too many customers and advertisers, and decide to delegate most of the big decisions to a team that keeps Twitter chugging along pretty much as is. In which case, there may not be enough popcorn in the world for the disappointment of those stans. Sooner or later, they may realize they weren't caping for a Marvel superhero, but a bored billionaire who never really cared for them in the first place. There you go. 2 articles on the Musk buyout of Twitter. All right, any questions or comments on that before we move on? We've got a video. Was it last week or the week before? We watched a video on the tethered space loop. The tethered ring. Yeah, the tethered ring. So this is another video on that topic. This is by the guy who created it, created the concept, and no. Okay, why is this not working? There we go. So we're going to watch this video. It's his presentation at, what's his name? You have his name here. Tethered Space Ring. It's got some pretty interesting stuff in it. It does not say who the guy is. Not sure, but it's a pretty good video. It goes over the basics. You don't see him speaking, but it's his slides with his voice over it. So let's listen to this, and then we can talk about the tethered space loop after if you are interested. All right, let me music. Oop, lost my sound. Yes, I did. All right, hold on. There we go. All right. Here we go.
So I want to introduce you to our next speaker, Phil Swan. Phil is the lead principal engineer at the Atlantis project. And if you don't know what that is, I encourage you, you're going to learn about it today, I encourage you to look it up online. Phil has a track record of developing successful innovations while working on advanced multidisciplinary projects, including Starlink, HoloLens, and Xbox. He has been granted 38 US patents, including most recently a patent for the tethered ring, for which you're going to learn more right now. He is the recipient of 3 corporate recognition awards, and we're very happy to have him here today. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you. Today, at the end of this presentation, you will learn how to go from Earth to space by way of a ring. But I also hope to inspire you to challenge conventional wisdom in your own industries, challenge entrenched thinkings about how things are done. And this is something that we're doing, and I hope you'll look at it and say, yeah, we could do that too. Now I'm going to jump around a little bit today between technology and business to keep the presentation interesting. I'll be wrapping up by talking about some incremental steps about how we can go from where we are today to a future where we have space infrastructure. The first business is sustainable space launch. So we have some good data already on how much it costs to go to space, and this is some of that data, $5,500 US dollars per kilogram. This is data from 2022. It also costs about $55 million per person to send something to the ISS, $1 billion per ton to send something to Mars. Now, we're doing this today with rockets, and rockets are a very well-established and mature technology, but there are still some innovations in the pipe. For example, Starship, SpaceX's Starship. Now, you can list all the different innovations that Starship is working on, and I've done this in the table. Now, since we don't have any hard cost data for something like Starship, what we can do is look at each innovation individually and ask to what degree we feel it's transformative, and then adjust the price per kilogram to space based on those assessments. But I would argue that we need something truly transformative to make a real dent in the cost of going to space and the environmental impact. And that truly transformative idea is electromagnetic space launch. So the idea here is that with a linear motor placed inside an evacuated tube, you can accelerate a spacecraft up to orbital speeds. Now, the problem with doing that on the surface of the Earth is that when the vehicle exits your tube at orbital speeds, it will simply burn up in the atmosphere like a meteorite in reverse. But if you can place that tube at the edge of space in the stratosphere, then this idea becomes technically feasible. By the way, the cost of doing this drops to $2 per kilogram rather than $5,500. Now, the usual argument against building any kind of expensive infrastructure is that there's not enough demand to justify it. So you look at this curve, which is an example of how people would make this argument. They would say that it would take, say, $110 billion to build this electromagnetic launcher before you get anything off the ground. Whereas if you use a program like Commercial Crew to make rockets more cheaply with the commercial industry, it costs about $8 billion, and then you're starting to get things to fly off the ground. Now, this is great for small amounts of small markets, but if you look at humanity's aspirations to, for example, set up a self-sustaining city on Mars one day, that's going to take 1 million tons sent to Mars. So we need to walk our way up this blue curve until we get to the point where we've got 1 million tons on the y-axis here, and then look across to see what the cost is. The cost is $19 trillion. Despite the high upfront cost of infrastructure, the infrastructure approach is far, far cheaper. In fact, you'd be saving something like $19 trillion if you built a tethered ring and put an electromagnetic launch system on it. Now, you may be asking at this point, what is this tethered ring thing that will save me $19 trillion? That would be nice to know that. So we'll move on to technology. Well, tethered ring is a patented technology. It's a dynamic structure. It's a multi-use platform, and it's something that's constructed on the Earth and then winched into space, literally lifted up into space by the action of pulling on cables. The reason I added this 42, anyone want to guess what 42 is about? The reason I added the 42 was to remind me about the question. So the question we wanted to answer with the tethered ring is, using only technology and materials that are available to us today, what is the most cost-effective way to get into space? So the answer to that, we feel, is a tethered ring. But what was very interesting about coming up with an answer is that then we had to re-examine the question and to see what kinds of questions that answer would provide an answer to. And some of those answers turned to relate to sustainability and transition to a carbon-neutral economy. So I mentioned it was a patented technology. What this means is the U.S. Patent Office assigned some subject matter experts to study the invention, and they concluded that it was new and non-obvious and that has utility. But I wanted to talk or help you visualize this idea of a tethered ring. So for a moment, just imagine you have a globe, and you turn the globe so that the Pacific Ocean is at the top. And then take a steel ring and place it on the globe, like I'm showing here. And then attach tethers, or let's imagine these being pieces of thread between the steel ring and points above the steel ring on the surface of the globe. Now you could imagine that if you could tighten up each of those tethers, like tightening up the spokes on a bicycle wheel, you could lift the steel ring off the surface of the globe, by a few millimeters perhaps. But this won't work on the scale of the real Earth. So what would happen is that steel ring would collapse like a rubber band at the scale of the Earth. So to prevent that, what we have to do is replace the steel ring with a pipeline. And on the inside of the pipeline, you have to put a maglev track, and they have to support another ring. And that internal ring has to rotate. Now, the rotating internal ring will generate outwards inertial forces. And those are represented here by these red arrows. So these inertial forces prevent the ring from collapsing when you pull it up with the tethers. So essentially what's happening here is the inertial forces are balanced against the tensile forces of those tethers to offset the forces of gravity, which are shown by these green arrows. The tethers should be forked so that they distribute their tensile force around the ring evenly, and they would tend to sag under the weight of gravity. And the steel ring doesn't have to be as thick as we've shown it here. It can be much thinner. And it doesn't have to be as high off the ground. So it's actually quite close to the Earth. It's about an altitude of 32 kilometers where it would be useful. So this is kind of what it would look like on the globe. Finally, you can build it in the Pacific Ocean, but then you can move it to a place where it would be more useful. So you don't have to leave it there. The example I'm showing here is we build it in the Pacific and we move it up northwest in order to place it over New Zealand, Australia, Western Asia, and or Eastern Asia and Western United States, Canada, Alaska. This is what a tethered ring would look like from space if you could put lights on it so you could see it. Without lights, you wouldn't be able to see it. This is a close-up of the tethers to show how they fork. And this is a rendering of the tethered ring in Google Earth, so you can get some landscape. And the last thing, I wanted to kind of give you a sense of where the tethered ring size or circumference fits amongst other projects that humanity has undertaken. So right below it is the Great Wall of China, and right above it is the US interstate system. So it may seem huge, but in reality, it's kind of in there with lots of other things we've done. Okay, transitioning from technology back to business models. My key challenge with any infrastructure project like this is you need to come up or make the case that it will generate enough revenue or enough value to offset the service the debt that is incurred to build it. And to that end, we've been working on a variety of business models, and I'm going to show you 3 of the interesting ones today. The first relates to something we were talking about earlier today, carbon neutral international travel. Today, this is a business that's serviced primarily by subsonic aircraft. Now, these aircraft are hard to make carbon neutral. For example, lithium-ion batteries are not energy dense enough to electrify these kinds of vehicles. So that's not really a great solution so far. Another possibility is high-speed electrified trains, but the problem with trains is their corridors are expensive. So these corridors fall into 3 categories. There's on-grade corridors, there's below-grade corridors, and then there's above-grade corridors. In each case, there's reasons why these corridors tend to be expensive in practice. And this is a table that shows lots of different corridor types and the prices. And you can see they're all kind of clouded up here on this graph. What we've been investigating is the technical and economic feasibility of a ring-mounted evacuated tube transit system. So a ring transit system has several advantages over airplanes. Like the individual vehicles are small, like business jets, and they depart frequently and they're very fast, and they're autonomous. They travel on maglev tracks, and they don't have like heavy components like wings and engines, fuel tanks, and landing gear. And they can't be hijacked. So the security for riding one of these would be more like a train station or subway security than airport security. In terms of the time it takes to go from place to place, this is an example. These are waterfall graphs.
We're watching a video on a presentation of the tethered ring technology that this guy has patented. We covered a video on this like 2 weeks ago, I think, and this is one that's a little bit more in depth. Curly Bear, how you doing, girl? I'm good. I'm getting ready to visit my grandson for the weekend. Yay! I'm going to look. Oh, okay, cool. Well, good. I'm glad you stopped by and you get to see your grandson. Good for you. Yeah, we're watching another video. YouTube comment I saw about. Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so I believe that a lone individual was able to get past Secret Service over the wall through the fence. 8-year-old man. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'm not. I think it's much like you're implying that it's something staged to just create sympathy for the corporate whores, specifically Nancy Pelosi and her insider trading schemes. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah. So this is I saw this. Of course they did. And 911 was never called? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's whatever. It's a bunch of affluent members of the predatory class. I mean, I don't want harm to come to anyone, regardless of where they are in, our system, but still, just not a lot of sympathy here. So, yeah, so this is the presentation by the people who kind of came up with the idea of the tethered ring, and they go into a bit more detail on kind of the different possibilities for how the tethered ring could be made, or how it could be used for creating energy and that sort of a thing. So it gives us a little bit more understanding of why this is a great thing that we should be doing. I did add this to my policies as one of the things on interstellar humanity. But yeah, so here we go.
Showing the travel time from Los Angeles to Kyoto, Japan as an example. It takes about 1/3 the time with the ring transit system versus planes. And geopolitically speaking, international transit projects are actually not without precedent. So the prestigious Chinese Academy of Engineering has already proposed a $200 billion plan to link China, Russia, Canada, and the US by transit system. This is a table of all these different sort of metrics of transit systems. The ones I wanted to bring your attention to, though, are that the cost of airlines is, a lot of it's in the airport, the land for the airport. And the cost of transit systems like rail systems, it's in the corridors. But with the ring transit system, you really only need little elevator terminuses at the bottom of the elevator cables. And you don't need to have airports, you don't need to have train lines on the ground. So this ends up being a lot cheaper in practice than other systems. But there's other advantages as well. All right, next I want to move on to a kind of an interesting business model that people might not really realize is a potential option. But that is about solar power, generation, storage, and transmission. So the idea here is simply to mount solar panels up on the tethered ring. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, the reason is they'd be more efficient up there. They're above the clouds. They're above 99% of the atmosphere. They don't accumulate dirt up there. They get full power from sunrise to sunset because they're so high up. They can see right to the horizon. They don't get blocked by mountains. And also because the ambient temperature up at the ring is about minus 40 degrees, the solar panels are actually far more efficient and they last longer because of the cool air. But whenever you have renewable energy, you're also dealing with intermittency issues. And so you need storage to reconcile the supply and the demand in the energy generation equation. Now, what's interesting about a tethered ring is that moving ring that I mentioned earlier, it stores a lot of kinetic energy. In fact, it stores about 58 terawatt hours of kinetic energy. And you can add power to the ring by speeding up a little bit, and you can take power out, and you can put power in one place and take it out in another. If you take just 0.5% of that energy and use it for time-shifting renewable energy, that's worth a lot of money. In fact, the amount of storage value in that amount of little shifted energy is equivalent to $635 billion worth of lithium-ion batteries, and that's not including the recycling costs. That alone would really fund the tethered ring more than like 10 times over. The next model is real estate and tourism. The idea here is to install perhaps about habitable floor space for perhaps about 250,000 people up on the ring. Now that sounds like a lot of people, but think about airplanes. They support 750,000 people up in the air at any given time, so 3 times as many people. The advantage of creating real estate up on a ring is that it's very high quality premium real estate, and you can actually sell it before it's built. You can sell pre-construction real estate. Lots of other interesting projects have done this. So it's a source of early funding. But increasing space tourism in this particular way supports the environment through something called the overview effect. So it has the potential to benefit this environment by convincing millions of people to make lifestyle changes once they've gone up there and looked down upon the Earth, or perhaps just vote for the best leaders to prevent global warming. All right, now I'm going to switch it back and talk about technology once again. There's 2 things I wanted to talk about: heritage technologies, which are basically technologies that sort of supply technology to the tethered ring, and capital cost. Let's start with heritage technologies. The first of these is magnetic bearings. Now, magnetic bearings are used in lots of industrial applications because they last longer and end up costing less than traditional mechanical bearings. This video shows a shaft that's being supported by magnetic bearings being hit by a hammer. And you can see the computer system quickly adjusts the magnetic fields to keep that shaft from flowing off center. This is very much like the system would support the spinning ring inside a tethered ring. Another heritage technology is carbon fiber. The tethers in the tethered ring are made of carbon fiber. Now, carbon fiber is not graphene and it's not carbon nanotubes. It's an industrially produced material today. The cost is coming down rapidly and the manufacturing capacity is going up exponentially. And there's like a figure of merit for this tethered ring, and that's the cost per kilogram that it supports. So you can make any size or any mass tethered ring you want, but it really comes down to this metric. This graph shows what that metric is. Basically, our reference design is the 32-kilometer high tethered ring. So at 32 kilometers, the cost per kilogram supported would be about $110 per kilogram. Now, to put that in perspective, an A380 has a cost per kilogram supported of about $3,000, and it only supports things at 10.6 kilometers. So this dot is about 100 times higher than this point here on the curve. So it's about our tethered ring is about 100 times cheaper than airplanes at supporting things up in the stratosphere. So it's more like a building than a plane. So next, I want to talk about some incremental steps. Some people have said, like, I can believe this is a technically feasible idea. I can believe this is an economically feasible idea, but it seems like a giant leap for mankind to go from where we are now to having built one of these things. It's a huge project, right? So let's talk about that. The first step would simply to build a magnetically levitated ring in a lab and experiment with it, and then you would move on to a larger scale project where you'd actually put a larger ring in a warehouse. It might be a little bit more dangerous, and you'd also start experimenting with manufacturing techniques to see if you could make this ring cheaply. And then you would go to a demonstrator project where you actually connect a magnetically levitated spinning ring to an electric grid to see if you can time shift energy with it. Now, why would you do this? Well, what's really interesting about magnetically levitated spinning rings is the way that the cost of energy storage scales with the diameter of the ring. This graph shows the energy you can store per dollar for a spinning ring, a magnetically levitated spinning ring, versus lithium-ion batteries and two kinds of flywheels, steel flywheels and carbon fiber flywheels. All this is to say that there's a financial incentive here to create ever larger spinning rings because the costs get very good, and they easily beat lithium-ion batteries after a certain scale. And of course, they're easier to recycle than lithium-ion batteries. They last forever as well. There's no reason they decay. The next step after this will be to build an energy storage minimal viable product, something that you can sell over and over again and make money with. And you might consider building something like this. This is a wave energy generation device. Inside it, there is a spinning.
Okay, this is something I found really, really interesting. I had not seen something quite like this before. There have been things that have taken advantage of the waves, but not as self-contained as this. I need to write this down, actually. What do you think? This is really, really cool.
Ring that stores energy, but it also, spinning ring in here is also used to support the power takeoff units, which are these little pistons. So as the water shifts or moves around the outer hull, these pistons are pushed around and they're supported by the inner spinning ring. Now the reason you would do this is that all the mechanical parts of this wave energy generator are on the inside, and so they don't corrode. They're not subject to biofouling or getting entangled with nets and things like that. And this makes the technology last in the ocean for a long time, which is something that all other wave energy technologies struggle with, and one of the reasons why they can't get off the ground. That's why wind and solar are popular, but wave energy is not. The next step after this would be perhaps to partner up with the particle physics community and build an underwater particle collider. And then we would hopefully at this point be able to jump to the first full-scale tethered ring, but this would be an uninhabited version. It would support the solar panel and the storage ideas. It might support cargo space launch. You could put communications gear on it, for example. And after that, you would go to the full-scale habited or inhabited model where you'd support the transit systems, human-rated space launch, and you'd create that habitable floor space where millions of people could go to look down upon the Earth and see the planet from a new perspective. So I hope I was able to convince you, or at least a few of you, that developing space infrastructure will not only help us transition to a carbon neutral economy, but it will also enable human civilization to expand out into the solar system. If any of this resonated with you, I just hope you'll find me afterwards and ask for me for my card, and feel free to hit me up with tough questions, and if you have any doubts, I definitely want to hear them. If you have some specialized knowledge, that'd be great to share too. But yes, just reach out and let me know what you think. Thanks very much.
All All right, there you go. You went into a bit more detail on its feasibility and that sort of thing, so it's really interesting, and just that how you could use the kind of tethered ring concept in the water to generate energy in a way that doesn't have a lot of the issues with other tidal technologies or wave-based technologies is really cool. All right, any questions or comments on that video? The tethered ring thing. And I have added a link to this presentation specifically to my policies as well. I apologize for yawning. I stayed up way too late finishing my book. Next, we've got an article on voting. Specifically dealing with voters with disabilities face a maze of new restrictions. This came out, when did this come out? October 28th. This came out yesterday. And obviously, I'm into politics, electoral politics, but also accessibility as well, because what I do for a living is I'm an accessibility professional. So electoral politics plus disability, something super important, because people with disabilities are already a marginalized community, marginalized demographic, and a lot of people who within the disability community tend to be people of color as well. So it's kind of this double goal of demographics within voting and electoralism. Okay, U.S. voters with disabilities face maze of new restrictions. Nearly 18 million Americans with disabilities voted in the 2020 election, but the new laws this year may change turnout. In late January, a judge in Wisconsin, of course it was Wisconsin, ruled that there were just two ways someone in the state could return a mail-in ballot. They could either place it in the mail or return it to their local clerk in person. That was a big problem for Martha Chambers. For the last 27 years, Chambers, who is 59 and lives in Milwaukee, has been paralyzed from the neck down after a horse riding accident. She can write and paint using a stick she holds in her mouth, but when it comes to voting, she needs help with her ballot. I can fill out my ballot, I can sign it, I can fill in the little dots, she said, but I can't hand it, I can't fold it, I can't put it in the envelope, she said. I could not put it in the mailbox. I can't get out my door to put it in the mailbox. When Wisconsin's spring primary came around, she didn't want to go to vote in person because of the health concerns, COVID, right? So she voted absentee. Took a risk and decided to have someone else return her ballot for her, despite court rulings saying that was illegal. That's fucking stupid. Saying that someone else can't take it, put it in the mail, is illegal? Are you kidding me? Like a rebel, she said, we should be able to vote without any concern, just like anybody else. This year, Chambers was one of millions of Americans trying to figure out a dizzying array of new restrictions and seemingly constant changes that threaten their ability to vote. Since the 2020 election, Republicans and GOP-aligned groups have focused on tightening laws that deal with transporting mail-in ballots and assisting voters, saying they are ripe for fraud. For the millions of U.S. voters with disabilities, those restrictions are significant. Any of the restrictions that have been proposed, if they have an impact on access for voters as a whole, then they tend to impact access voters with disabilities exponentially, says Michelle Bishop, Voter Access and Engagement Manager with the National Disability Rights Network. Nearly 18 million Americans with disabilities voted in the 2020 election, an increase of 6 points from 2016, according to a recent study from Rutgers University. Voters with disabilities were nearly twice as likely to report some difficulty casting a ballot as voters without a disability in 2020. A provision of the Voting Rights Act says any voter who requires assistance to vote by reason of blindness, disability, or inability to read or write may be given assistance by a person of the voter's choice. other than the voter's employer or agent of employer or officer or agent of the voters' union. Okay, sure. So that they don't have coercion from people they work with or other collectives. Okay, sure. But of course, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, right? In Alabama, Republicans banned curbside voting, a practice used by voters who cannot enter the polling place because of a disability. The new Texas law limited what assistance voters could get at the polls and required those who provided assistance to swear an oath. In Florida, a new law makes it harder to request a mail ballot, and it is now illegal to return more than 2 ballots that do not belong to themselves or a family. In Wisconsin, there have been a slew of court rulings this year tweaking what's allowed under state law. In July, the state Supreme Court said ballot drop boxes were illegal. Fucking stupid. But left unclear whether third parties could help voters place their ballots in the mail. In late August, a federal judge ruled that voters with disabilities can have someone assist them with returning their ballots after Chambers and a handful of other voters filed a lawsuit. But voters are still confused about the law, says Barbara Becker, the director of external advocacy for Disability Rights Wisconsin. Over the last few months, she's been fielding questions from voters who are still unsure about what they're allowed to do. One of the people she talked to recently was someone taking care of a friend who was disabled. Instead of taking the person's ballot to the mailbox, he walked his friend to the mailbox, a distance from their home, because they weren't sure if they could take the friend's ballot to the mailbox. She said she had also heard from voters who could not place their own ballots in the mail and chose not to vote because they did not want to break laws as courts had interpreted it before the August ruling. So stupid. This will be the 4th election this year, and for each election, the guidance in the law has been different for ballot return assistance. Do you find that confusing? I do. She said a lot of people with disabilities are isolated. They may live in a congregate setting. They may not have internet access. They're not following the breaking news on the latest lawsuit about election law, she said. When Texas held its primary earlier this year, Amy Litzinger, the 34-year-old resident with cerebral palsy, who uses a wheelchair, had to figure out if she was even eligible for assistance. Texas law only authorizes a voter to get help with their ballot if they cannot write or see, or if they can't read the language the ballot is written in. Litzinger can read and write well enough to scribble her name. She wasn't sure if she qualified for assistance. And even if she did, the person helping her would be required to swear a new oath administered at the polls that said Litzinger represented that she was eligible to receive assistance. Among other things, the assistant had to swear that their assistance would be limited to reading the ballot to the voter, directing the voter to read the ballot, marking the voter's ballot, or directing the voter to mark the ballot. Dear God. Earlier this year, a federal judge blocked Texas from limiting the kind of help voters can get at the polls, allowing assisters to do more than just read and help fill out the ballot. Get back here. They still have to sign a modified oath. What I'm worried about is if my attendants know that they have to sign something and they feel uncomfortable with it, not only will they not take me to vote, they won't work the whole day if they know that I'm planning to vote because they're nervous about the whole thing, she said. Right, this sort of crap has a very chilling effect on voting and on elections and on the voice of the people being heard. It's not a good thing. But of course, that's why they do it, right? In Florida, voters can only return 2 ballots for people not in their families. Stupid, but okay. Not everyone with a disability lives with a family, or maybe they don't have a caregiver and rely on their neighbor, said Olivia Babis, a senior policy analyst with Disability Rights Florida. It's restricting who people with disabilities can choose to have help them or support them delivering that ballot. There's some concerns about the chilling effect, she added, when you have the administrator of a nursing home collect the mail, does that count as you're turning in 15 people's ballots? A good question. There's been no real clear language or legislative intent there. Yeah, that's kind of a thing. In Alabama, the state's ban on curbside voting makes it harder for voters with disabilities to keep their votes private, said Eric Peebles, 41, who has spastic cerebral palsy and is the executive director of the Independent Living Center of Mobile. Those with disabilities qualify to vote by mail in Alabama, but must either get 2 witnesses or a notary to sign their ballot. What? That's fucking stupid. During the pandemic, that was extremely risky for Peebles because of his high risk for complications from COVID. Oh my God. I need assistance filling out my ballot. I would much rather be declaring my preferences to my assistant in the sanctity of my car with the windows rolled up, rather than sitting in a gymnasium where, if you're lucky, they've got the paper dividers up there, said Peebles, who has sued Alabama over the access it provides for disabled voters. Litzinger, the Texas voter, said many of the restrictions stemmed from the view that people with disabilities could easily be unduly influenced or manipulated into how they cast their vote, an idea she strongly disputed. The idea that people with disabilities are intentionally more influenced or more vulnerable than the rest of us, when we all get ideas from people we know about what we care about, people care about things in groups, that's how it works, she said. I have a degree in political science. I've been a deputy registrar. I know what I'm doing. Nobody's telling me what to vote for. I go research it myself. I just need help opening and closing the envelope. All right. There you go. Questions or comments on that? Fuck off advertising. This is, I really need to improve their CSS here. This is just getting ridiculous. Down a little bit. Okay, next one. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. This is on the 26th, 3 days ago. Economists say Tim Mitchell's? We're gonna go Tim Mitchell's. Tim Mitchell's flat tax idea would only benefit the rich. Okay, so yeah, and I've got a post I've kind of started, well, a while ago, researching the idea of flat taxes. I'm pretty much patently against them. You know, early off in my journey into politics, I was pro flat tax because, on its face, it seems to make sense, right? Everyone gets taxed the same. That just makes sense. But much like the title of this is saying, it benefits the rich because the tax that those who have less would pay under a progressive scheme is significantly more than if it was progressive. And those who are rich pay significantly less than if they pay less than they would if there was a progressive tax scheme. And that's pretty much the issue. It disproportionately increases the amount of tax that people in lower demographics would pay. All right, let's see what they have to say. More than 24 economists say a flat tax that Republican gubernatorial candidate Tim Mitchell's has said he is open to would only favor Wisconsin's richest residents. Under the flat tax Mitchell's has alluded to, about 3% of residents would get an income tax cut while making $25,000 to $300,000 per year, while people making $25,000 to $300,000 per year would get an increase, said Michael Rosen, Milwaukee Area Technical College professor emeritus of economics and a longtime Democratic political activist. People making more than $500,000 a year would get an average tax cut of $22,800 per year, Rosen said. Right, and this is kind of where you're getting into these. You see it like right here, $25,000. We're looking at people who are impoverished right now. People who are impoverished are getting a tax increase, which is highly problematic. Now, people making over like $100,000 or more getting a tax increase, that is a good thing. That's the way it should be. Although people making more than $500,000 should never, ever get a tax cut. Never, ever, ever get a tax cut. Never, never, ever. So that's why flat taxes are problematic, especially on a larger scale like this. Almost all tax schemes should be progressive. Like if you're making below the poverty line, like even anywhere near the poverty line, you should be getting a tax credit until you're significantly above that poverty line. And then as you go up, the taxes should go up to 100%, if not more, in taxes. Like currently in my tax policy, I have a minimum wage of about $70,000, $75,000 per year, maximum wage of 9 times the minimum wage, which ends up being $675,000. But the marginal tax rate at the maximum wage is 100%. So it's a progressive taxation going from basically $75,000 up to $675,000, which basically has at $675,000 that person taking home about $250,000 after taxes. So the actual income disparity between the lowest and the highest is actually ×3 instead of the ×9. Once you take into account the 100% marginal tax rate at the maximum wage. The findings are written in a letter signed by economics professors from University of Wisconsin, Missouri, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and presented at a news conference Wednesday in Milwaukee. Good. Representatives for the Mitchells campaign were sent the letter, but could not immediately be reached for comment Wednesday. During the only debate between Mitchells and Governor Tony Evers, Mitchell said he would enact a massive tax reform to get more money into people's pockets. Which people is the question, right? 99% or the top 10%? Mitchells has provided a few details about his tax plan during a campaign stop October 5th at the Square Tavern in downtown Baraboo. He said he thinks the tax could be about 5%. I'm going to sit down with the smart tax people. We're going to figure out how low we can get the income tax, Mitchell said in Baraboo. Right now, it looks like we get somewhere just below 5%. If you had a flat tax at that number, the tax level would actually come up for those in the lowest income bracket. I do not want to raise the taxes on anyone. Okay, well, anyone who says this is the problem. Because one of the primary goals of taxation, especially the farther up you go, especially on the federal level, is inflation. How do you fight inflation? You increase taxes. Who do you increase taxes on? You increase taxes on those at the top. That's pretty much the way it is. Progressive taxation going all the way up to the top. And if it's anything other than that, you're wrong. Mitchell regularly reports more than $1 million in state income taxes. That payment level suggests he has income of up to tens of millions of dollars a year, meaning he would be one of the top benefactors of a flat tax. See, there you go. Wisconsin's income tax rates start at 3.54% and rise to 7.65%. Republicans who control the state legislature over the past decade have focused on their income tax rates on the middle brackets, but largely left in place the top rate, which is levied at individuals of income for $267,000 and up. Okay, let's look at this. Wisconsin income tax rates. Okay, so here it is. Here's the breakdown. Married. Okay, so let's go single here. So 12,000 to 25,000 to 280,000. Okay, so what would I do? I would do. Where's the fuck? Okay, here's the percentages. Okay, so here, if you're making nothing, tell you what, we'll give them. Well, yeah. So here we're looking at UBI, right? Here we're looking at, let's say, $1,000. If you're making less than Jesus Christ, we're making less than this, 25,000. Sure, for argument's sake, let's say less than 5%, or less than 25,000. Let's make it less than 30,000. Less than $30,000, you're getting $1,000 a month. Okay, and then here I would start at, let's say, 30 to 40. I don't even like that number, but let's just start there. 30 to 40, maybe it'll be 2%. Maybe go 2%, 2% up, all the way up to about 10% for anyone over. Oh, I don't know. I can't even do math. That's 5, right? 5. So that would be 50,000, 80,000. So sure, anyone over 80,000, you're doing 10% tax at that point. Just looking at these numbers, just throwing them around. Because if it's not like this, why are you taxing people that don't have any money? Why are you taxing people a significant amount if they're already impoverished? What fucking sense does that make? So we're looking at UBI here, but below the poverty rate, and then take the tax rate all the way up to at least 10%. At least 10% for state income taxes. Okay, so that's probably the way I would handle it. I'll throw this in here for you. This is for state of Wisconsin, I think. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on that, please let me know. This is my first time actually looking at state taxes. Okay, so there you go. Republican State Senator Dale Kooyenga, a certified public accountant, said he has been a long-term advocate of flat tax for Wisconsin. Fuck that guy. There would be significant dynamics to work through to make it work the way the state's tax code is structured. I think the policy could favor everyone, if not directly, indirectly, said Kooyenga, who is leaving the Senate at the end of the year. A lot of people who are older with higher incomes leave the state because we have higher taxes. We have a better community when we have more seniors around. Kooyenga said getting to a flat tax could be difficult in 2 years, which is how Wisconsin's budget cycle is structured. But if certain policies are put into place, the state could get there over time. Other Republican candidates have campaigned in Wisconsin on getting a flat tax, but the idea has never gone anywhere because it's stupid. Elsewhere, the idea has succeeded. Utah adopted a flat tax in 2007, of course, highly conservative. North Carolina in 2014, Kentucky in 2019. Next year, Idaho and Mississippi will, and in 2024, Arizona and Georgia will adopt a flat tax. Oh my God. New analysis prepared by Wisconsin Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau shows in order to enact a flat tax without significant spending cuts, the new flat tax rate would have to be 5.22%. Okay, 1 of 1. All right. Why didn't they turn this into an image? Seriously. If that were to happen, the Bureau projects about 73% of tax filers would see an increase of $249 per year on average. Assuming the state legislature is unwilling to pass significant new regressive sales and property taxes, financing a flat tax would require massive spending cuts. Of course, because that's what right-wingers want. They want spending cuts so they can privatize everything. Right? Austerity for the masses and socialism for the top 10%. Michels has said that he is only interested in the flat tax if it doesn't raise taxes for anyone, which doesn't make any fucking sense at all. So for that to happen, the flat tax rate would need to be 3.5%. That rate would be a windfall for the state's richest taxpayers, but reduced Wisconsin's revenue by $5.59 billion the first year and $3.85 billion every year after, according to economists. Yeah, it's so ridiculous to even talk about it. For perspective, $3.855 billion is more than the University of Wisconsin-Madison's total budget and 7 times greater than the support that the state currently provides to the university. A lot of Republicans talk about how they love the police, but are they willing to defund the police when they aren't getting enough taxes to support it? Said Loz Souza, an economics professor at MATC. Good question. All right, so there you are. Something about the flat tax. I have an article started on this, but I haven't really gone into it, researched it a lot. So I have another article here for it. All right. put the wrong thing in there. So the next article we have here is about automation. This is specifically looking at Starbucks and their automated barista sort of a thing. Short article, just looking at this. My issue at that point were not baristas. Starbucks barista complains about new automated siren system cold bar, sparking debate. It takes the handcrafted part out of it. This is from the 24th, so this is just 5 days ago. A Starbucks barista posted on TikTok about how much she hates the coffee shop chain's new siren system cold bar. The barista named Yasmin M_008 shared the video using the viral TikTok sound that says, "Please, I'm absolutely fine. There is nothing to worry." And then the sound cuts off to show what's bothering the person. For Yasmin, it's Starbucks siren system cold bar. The new system is part of Starbucks reinvention strategy, which includes automations it plans to begin using over the next 3 years that will get food and drink orders to customers faster while cutting down on the work done by employees. The siren system is a new cold beverage system that reduces the number of steps needed to make the drinks, as well as the need for employees to repeatedly bend down and dig into buckets for ice. Okay, all right, so that's, those are good reasons to increase automation, helping to reduce the wear and tear on employees. Sure. However, Daily Dot previously covered TikTok user Night Toast to argue that new automation is meant to appeal to shareholders rather than actively help baristas. Exactly right. Yasmin says she doesn't understand the reason for the new system. In her video's caption, she says, "Okay, but why though?" TikToker isn't the only one who doesn't appreciate the new system. Other baristas commented their issues with the system. No, because DT times will be terrible and I don't want to hear nothing about it, one viewer commented. I don't know what DT times mean. I'd rather make 10 caramel ribbon crunches with extra drizz and crunch than make one frap on the new bar, a second commented. Third said, my issue is at that point we're not baristas because we're not making the drink. The machine is doing it for us. Sad face. Takes away the handcrafted element. Other commenters said other options would have been more helpful for baristas actually working at Starbucks. Why do we need a machine to scoop ice for us? That's the easiest part, one TikToker wrote in all caps. I was telling my shift about this, and I think a self-emptying espresso bar is more convenient because I hate changing the grounds drawer, another TikToker commented. Some pointed out that the automation may cut down on time required to make a drink only until peak service hours. Others added that it'll take longer to clean and maintain. The thing that gets me about this is these test stores have no customers. Let's see a man versus a machine during peak, one user said. Okay, yeah. Another user wrote, I get how it might be faster, but the extra pieces and equipment that will need to be cleaned, maintenances, and could break is too much hassle. Daily Dot reached out to the creator via comment and to Starbucks via email. All right, so there's another moment of automation that's slowly creeping in because profits will require getting rid of as many humans as possible to reduce costs. Because unions and all that sort of stuff. All right. Next, questions, comments. Suppose I can just take this off because not on it. All right. We're tearing through it. Okay, this is from last Sunday. No, here we go. Okay, Sunday 26th. What? May 26th. Okay, this is from May. Sorry. May 2022. U.S. warns of total societal collapse due to breaching of planetary boundaries. Larger. Just ridiculous. Ooh, look at that. Got Earth on fire, pollution, and rockets going into space. All right, let's see what they have to say here. Oh, yeah, so this is from May. So when the United Nations published its 2022 Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction, GAR 2022, in May, the world's attention was on its grim verdict that the world was experiencing an accelerating trend of natural disasters and economic crises. But not a single media outlet picked up the biggest issue, the increasing probability of civilization to collapse. Now, if you're a regular here, you know where I stand on this. I'm 100% doomer. And that's pretty much where we're headed for. We're headed for high levels of extinction globally in the next 200 years. I have a daughter, 13. Her and her friends are going to see some of the greatest horrors humanity has ever seen. As the droughts increase, the fires increase, the flooding increase, and all that sort of stuff, that we've got clams being just boiled alive in the water. We've got berries and wheat being put right there. We've got all sorts of horrors going on here because of climate change. And, as long as the United States is not working, watch Brazil. It's election day. Oh, watch Brazil tomorrow. It's election day. Tomorrow's Sunday. Okay. That's good to know. Brazil. Hopefully Lula wins, right? Brazil. Lula. Brazil. Lula. Yeah. Sunday. Yeah, hopefully he wins. Hopefully something good will come of this. As much. Yep, they have election on Sunday. Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Hopefully he wins, and hopefully, you can't really undo the damage that's been done to the Amazon. Now the best he can hope for is if he does win to. Whoa. What? I don't know what just happened. All right. Hold on. What? All right. Let's try this again. Labs. There we go. All right, that was bothering me. Hopefully, if he is able to win, he can at least start working on a conservation effort to help conserve and replant the Amazon. It's not going to help us so much because it takes forests are carbon positive for the first 20 years, and then after that they can start becoming carbon negative. So they would, maybe if they work with some of the indigenous populations there in Brazil and declare a bunch of that stuff as a bunch of that land, which was originally the Amazon rainforest, and set that up for conservation, then hopefully in 20 years that will be carbon negative again. That's probably the best we can hope for. It's not gonna, even if we got that in the next 20 years, that's still, we're the negative feedback loop that has already been started by the Amazon being burned we're not going to be able to stop that. It really requires that the United States ends its global terrorism projects and basically becomes the world's leader on sustainable energy and war on climate change. That's the only way humanity will have a chance to survive and perhaps not face global extinction. The United States is the leader, or we're fucked. It is. All right. Buried in the report, which was endorsed by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, is the finding that escalating synergies between disasters, economic vulnerabilities, and ecosystem failures are escalating the risk of global collapse scenario. The stark conclusion appears to be the first time that the UN has issued a flagship global report finding that existing global policies are accelerating toward the collapse of human civilization. Yet somehow, this urgent warning has remained unreported until now. But it's not good for profits, right? The report does not suggest that this outcome is inevitable or specify how close to this possibility we are, but it does confirm that without radical change, that's where the world is heading. UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai Framework are a set of social, economic, legal, political, and institutional measures to reduce disaster risk and losses. Both involve targets to 2030, which the world is in danger of failing to meet. That failure, however, is directly linked to the rate at which human activities are interfering with natural systems, in particular, planetary boundaries. The Planetary Boundaries Framework was developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center in 2009 to provide what it calls a science-based analysis of the risk that human perturbations will destabilize the Earth system at the planetary scale. This framework identifies a range of 9 key ecosystems. If pushed past a certain threshold, will dramatically reduce the safe operating space for human habitation. So the book that I recommend reading is Donut Economics. That is what she kind of talks about there. I'll go and throw this in here. You'll see this her donut thing here. This talks about the 9 planetary things and kind of rates those, and kind of her economics deals with that, and that's why this is such an amazing book. Here's the video on it. There's another. Yeah, her books and videos are here. I'll take a look at that. The report notes that at least 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries now seem to be operating outside the safe operating space. While land system change and climate change are in a zone of uncertainty with increasing risk of overstepping the safe operating space, the report says biochemical flows and novel entities, new engineered chemicals, materials or organisms, and natural elements mobilized by human activities such as heavy metals have far exceeded that space. However, the situation is likely to be worse than acknowledged in the UN's report. Yeah, because we really don't know, like, how far these positive feedback loops, how positive they are, how much they're working, or, as far as, I talk about it, we're already in the end of days. I mean, the feedback loop's already kicked in. We're pretty much fucked without radical global change. Because, the carbon is going up. We have to get ourselves so carbon negative, that we can start pulling that down. You can't even see me. So if we can't pull it down, we're not even going to see any change. And it's going to far overshoot to the point where global devastation is going to happen, and that's just going to accelerate it even more. Byline Times revealed last summer that, according to Professor Will Steffen of the Stockholm Resilience Center, 2 more planetary boundaries, ocean acidification and fresh water use, would probably by then also be transgressed, meaning that we are reaching 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. If we continue to cross boundaries at this rate, it is possible that we cross almost all of them before 2030. Ugh. According to the UN's report, the human material and ecological footprint is accelerating the rate of change. The potential impact when systemic risks become cascading disasters is that systems are at risk of collapse. Yet, although the risk of systemic collapse is discussed at different points of the report, the global collapse scenario did not receive extensive elaboration. Instead, the report makes reference to a separate contributing paper published by the UN's Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. That paper, Pandemics, Climate Extremes, Tipping Points, and Global Catastrophic Risk, How These Impact Global Targets, offers an in-depth scenario analysis of global collapse risks based on how human activities are transgressing planetary boundaries. The paper is authored by, there's a link to it here, which you can barely see, but it is blue. It's authored by Thomas Cernev, a researcher at the University of Cambridge's Center for the Study of Existential Risk. It finds that the continuation of business as usual and a failure to invoke drastic policy changes means that human civilization is moving inexorably toward collapse. Imagine that. If you don't do anything, strangely, it's going to get worse. From the scenario analysis, it is evident that in the absence of ambitious policy and near global adoption and successful implementation, the world continually tends toward the global collapse scenario, it says. 4 pathways, 3 lead to collapse. Thomas Chernev's paper identifies 4 potential pathways ahead, yet only one of them, Stable Earth, involves the achievement of global targets under the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Sendai framework. All the others are heading toward collapse. In all these scenarios, except for Stable Earth, the achievement of global targets and accompanying frameworks is negatively impact, the report states. Furthermore, in the absence of change, scenarios Earth under uncertainty and Earth under threat tend toward that of global collapse. The paper explains that by adopting a systems analysis, it is possible to see how the crossing of one planetary boundary systematically results in the crossing of others. So we're looking at positive feedback loops pushing. Once you cross one planetary boundary, then that creates a positive feedback loop that pushes very strongly towards the others being crossing as well, unless you have a massive negative feedback loop because you're very carbon negative. They are crucial to providing a safe operating space for human societies to develop within a stable Earth system. With the passing of these boundaries subsequently and more likely resulting in societal destabilization and potential GCR events, global catastrophic risk events. Global catastrophic risk events are defined as those leading to more than 10 million fatalities, oh my God, or greater than $10 trillion in damages. My God. Okay, all right, those are fair numbers. Paper's worst case global collapse scenario is described as the result of multiple planetary boundaries being breached, increasing the likelihood of global catastrophic global catastrophic risk events have not already occurred or in the process of occurring, then their likelihood of doing so in the future is extreme, the paper says. In this scenario, global targets have most likely not been achieved, and the resulting collapse of society in the scenario means that the future achievement of any global targets is unlikely, and total societal collapse is a possibility. Disaster risk reduction has not been successful, and disasters are common with disaster events as well as global catastrophic risk events. This needs to be one acronym. Not that that would help me remember, but such as pandemics increasing. It goes on to suggest that in a scenario without policy changes designed to mitigate risks and make the global system more resilient and adaptable, the crossing of planetary boundaries is likely to exacerbate global catastrophic risk with large and complex environmental feedback loops leading to further environmental and social collapse. Right. And that depending on the extent of the crossing of the planetary boundaries and the severity of any global catastrophic risk events that may have occurred, policy interventions that are not drastic are unlikely to improve society, and a reactive policy approach will need to be taken. They're exactly right. And this is basically saying the same thing that I've been saying, for the past few years. And much like I say, I'm pretty sure I say in my policies that any environmental policy that is not, quote, radical and that does not basically start with $10 trillion a year is just voting for human extinction, because that's the level of radicalness that we really need to save humanity. Let's see. That scenario leads to extremely limited international cooperation, in turn creating a higher risk of global or environmental conflict as the environment degrades, with potential forced migrations of people from uninhabitable areas. That in turn has the potential to heighten global catastrophic risk by making events such as pandemic or nuclear war more likely. Right, so much like we've read in a previous article a few weeks ago, the global south is the one who will suffer the most from climate change, but they are the ones who have contributed the least to climate change. So again, we're looking at systemic and structural racism on geopolitical scales, right? Global south, color, suffering the most from environmental harms, much like you see in cities where the dirtiest places where there's the most pollution is where people of color are. because that's the way the zoning ends up being. Not going to pollute white people's spaces, but if there's people of color here, yeah, sure, we can pollute and kill them, but that's just the way it is. And it's pretty fucked up, and this is happening on a global scale as well. While the global collapse scenario represents the worst case, it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that we can see signs of it emerging today. A greater concern is that the two other scenarios explored by the paper still tend toward this worst case scenario. In the Earth under threat scenario, planetary boundaries have been crossed past a safe limit, or there is a large degree of uncertainty as to humanity's position relative to the boundaries, with strong suspicion and evidence of some, if not all of them, crossed. We appear to be either very close to reaching this point or have already reached it. Yeah, and this is the primary issue. None of us have any clue where we are. We don't have, powerful enough computers to truly model and understand, where we are within these 9 limits, right? So it's much safer for us to assume that we don't have a fucking clue, and that we have already, we're pretty much have overshot them, and to act with that level of radicalness in order to prevent all these horrors from happening, like they're happening now. This is only going to get worse. UN paper adds, whilst global catastrophic risk is low and global catastrophic risk events are unlikely to occur, the complex feedback loops that operate between the planetary boundaries are likely to increase the likelihood of global catastrophic risk events occurring in the near future. The paper argues that political and global instability will be exacerbated by a quickly degrading environment, which could further drive conflict and hinder future progress towards achieving global targets. In this scenario, the world is on a path toward a global collapse scenario where global catastrophic risk events are occurring unless considerable preventative and reactive policy interventions that are ambitious and globally adopted and successfully undertaken. Even in the Earth under uncertainty scenario, where planetary boundaries have not been extensively crossed, or there is a high level of uncertainty as to humanity's position to the boundary, which is where we should assume we are, we would still be in a position where global catastrophic risk is high, with likelihood of global catastrophic risk event being extreme or a GCR event having already occurred or in the process of occurring. Avoiding collapse. Despite the potential to achieve some global targets and international cooperation, the paper concludes that only further ambitious policy changes can ensure that development targets are achieved and the world is not pushed towards global collapse scenario. The paper states the scenario analysis undertaken illustrates a dangerous tendency for the world to tend towards global collapse scenario. Of course, because there's no short-term profit to be made in saving humanity from extinction. There just isn't. Although reactive policies are necessary to mitigate existing risks, the paper calls for a focus on preventative policies to build greater system resilience and to avoid further crossing planetary boundaries. In particular, calls for the creation of a planetary boundaries goal in the next version of the SDGs adopted after 2030, along with the incorporation of GCR into targets. After 2030, they should have done this a decade ago. Yeah, this should have been done like in 2020 or something like that. All right, I diluted. What do I think about Israel? They are a genocidal terrorist organization. That's what I think about Israel. What do you think about Israel? Israel bad. The United States is bad for supporting them. Ooh, sorry. I was up late reading. Israel super mega ultra bad. I tend to support BDS, but I know there's problems with that approach. I'm just not sure what other approach would be more useful than BDS, but at least that's the place where we can start. I'm Israeli. Why would? Well, because you're engaging in genocide against Palestinians. I mean, for a very long time, and you're in violation of quite a few international treaties. I mean, besides being a genocidal terrorist organization, I'm, what more do you need? All right. As I found in 2017 as a researcher at Anglia Ruskin University's Global Sustainability Institute, the process of global societal collapse is likely to accelerate as a self-reinforcing feedback loop between human system destabilization and Earth system disruption. In this feedback loop, Earth system disruptions, in this case triggered by breaching of planetary boundaries, destabilize social, political, and economic institutions. This in turn inhibits successful policy responses to, oh my god, ESD, to Earth system disruptions, leaving planet vulnerable and to further Earth system disruption outbreaks. The result is a feedback effect in which, god, HSD, human system destabilization. Okay, human system destabilization, Earth system destabilization. Okay, result is a feedback effect in which human system destabilization and Earth system destabilization occur in an amplifying cycle with the potential to culminate in a dramatic loss of complexity in the human system, what might be defined as a collapse. The UN Global Assessment Report, so you say we're doing genocide, but the Palestinians, but the population. Yeah, I've seen this statistics. Ultimately, what you are doing, your actions are genocidal. Regardless of what the population is, you are engaging in that. The UN Global Assessment Report and its contributing paper by Thomas Chernev offering scenarios that are consistent with this process, but it is not clear whether any of these scenarios have actually begun, only that currently the world is tending dangerously toward them. No precise timescales are identified in the documents, and neither the UN nor Chernev have responded to requests for comment from Byline Times. But there are reasons to suspect that a collapse process has already started, even if it is still possible to rein in. A senior advisor to the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and contributor to the Global Assessment Report, who spoke to Byline Times on conditions of anonymity, claims that the GAR 2022 is watered down before public release. Right, because they don't want to cause public panic. They need to stop watering it down and pretty much say exactly what it is. They said that the world has passed a point of no return, and I don't feel that this is being properly represented in UN or media as of now. Right, and that's the exact problem. They need to basically cause public outcry and fear so that governments will take this seriously. Right now, what they're saying doesn't meet the level of concern that we need to be applying to it. It needs to be panicked. The GAR 2022 is an eviscerated skeleton of what was included in earlier drafts, they claim. The UN GAR 2022 is a landmark document. It is the first time that the United Nations has clearly underscored the impending risk of total societal collapse. The human system continues to cross the planetary boundaries, critical to maintaining a safe operating space for the Earth system. Yet, despite this urgent warning, not only has it fallen on deaf ears, the UN itself appears to have diluted its own findings. Like the fictional film Don't Look Up, we are more concerned with celebrity gossip and political scandals, seemingly unable or unwilling to confront the most important challenge that now faces us as a species. Either way, these UN documents show that recognizing the risk of collapse is not about doom-mongering, but about understanding risks so we can make better choices and avoid worst-case outcomes. As the report acknowledges, there's still much that can be done, but the time for action is not after 2030. It's not. That's exactly right. And it was 10 years ago, and my policies talk all about the sorts of things that we need to be doing to save humanity from extinction. I mean, there's just a metric crap load of stuff, but the problem is there's the government basically needs to start just dropping trillions and trillions of dollars. And I mean, like a federal government here needs to throwing trillions of dollars into our economy, specifically setting up mass transportation that is powered by sustainable energy. They need to be subsidizing geothermal energy, because one of the most expensive parts of that is the drilling of the holes. And if they can subsidize that, that can explode. I mean, not explode as in explode, but that is something we can drastically increase the availability of having much more geothermal. Now, fortunately, we can't use it in all the places. So wherever we can use it, we should use it. There's like one set of standards that I've seen for every coal plant that's there, we can fit like 9, depending on a specific size, we can fit 9 geothermal plants in that same space and get 9 times the energy back from it. Now, there's also the what do they call it? Deep, ultra deep. Let me find this. Oh no, go back here. There's the ultra deep. Ultra deep geothermal. This is just being researched and tested. If the U.S. government threw trillions, billions into that at least, then we could literally have geothermal anywhere in the world, and we could have baseload sustainable energy from ultra deep geo, which is what we need. So we need tidal, wave, stream, ocean, that sort of a thing, plus ultra deep geothermal and other geothermal types as baseload power. And you can also get into other types here: wind, power satellites, hydrogen wind turbines, things of that nature too for baseload power. Okay, that one was pretty long. I wasn't expecting that one to be quite so long. Any questions on that, the environment, saving humanity from extinction, or anything like that? So much that needs to be done. It's over here, but countries aren't doing it, especially the United States. The United States is a large part of the problem. All right, this is Scoop.me, Progressive News Agency, Europe. This is from November. This is from 2 years ago. Okay, yeah, this might be a little bit old. So this is about 2 years ago. I remember hearing about this. I know we've covered this, but we'll cover this again because it's interesting to. Hold on a second. I don't know what I did. Okay. So Finland ends homelessness and provides shelter for all in need. All right. Again, this is 2 years ago, about the same time, November 10th. In Finland, the number of homeless people has fallen sharply. The reason the country applies the housing first concept. Those affected by homelessness receive a small apartment and counseling without any preconditions. 4 out of 5 people affected thus make their way back to a stable life. And all this is cheaper than accepting homelessness. Right. And so Finland is doing this, which is awesome, housing first. And we've watched a video or two or read a few articles on this sort of concept as well. It's in my policies, housing first, housing is a human right. And this is the way we need to do it. And It's, if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the biopsychosocial model, you'll see, that if you don't have a place to live and a place to call your own, a place where you're safe and you've got food and safety, it's hard to make any progress in other aspects of your life. Housing first. And there was articles, studies showing that it's 3 times cheaper to give people housing than it is to police it and deal with the other issues that come with it, such as the healthcare issues and so on and so forth. Finland is the only country in Europe where homelessness is in decline. In 2008, you could see tent villages and huts standing between trees in the parks of Helsinki. Homeless people had built makeshift homes in the middle of Finland's capital city. They were exposed to harsh weather conditions. I bet they were. Cold as fuck up there. Since the 1980s, Finnish governments have been trying to reduce homelessness. Short-term shelters were built. However, long-term homeless people were still left out. There were too few emergency shelters, and many affected people did not manage to get out of homelessness. They couldn't find jobs without a housing address, and without a job, they couldn't find a flat, apartment. It was a vicious circle. Furthermore, they had problems applying for social benefits. All in all, homeless people found themselves trapped. Right, it is a vicious cycle. Getting out of poverty, especially homeless-based poverty. But in 2008, the Finnish government introduced a new policy for the homeless, started implementing the Housing First concept. Since then, the number of people affected has fallen sharply. And the country is successful. It is the only EU country where the number of homeless people is declining. Now, this is something that we could be doing here as well, shifting from a housing first, shifting to a housing first policy instead of putting so many different gateways to barriers to people's ability to get access to housing. Housing first, how everyone is given residence in Finland. It is NGOs such as the Y Foundation that provide housing for people in need. They take care of the construction themselves, buy flats on the private housing market, and renovate existing flats. The apartments have 1 or 2 rooms. In addition to that, former emergency shelters have been converted into apartments in order to offer long-term housing. It was clear to everyone that the old system wasn't working. We needed a radical change, says Juha Kakinen, director of the Y Foundation. Homeless people turn into tenants with tenancy agreements. They also have to pay rent and operating costs. Social workers who have offices in the residential buildings help with financial issues such as applications for social benefits. See what we got here. Yeah, once they have a place to live, then they can apply for social benefits, then they can get the social support in order to pay for whatever. All right, there we go. Oh, let's get back over here. Sorry. Juha Kakinen is head of the Y Foundation. The NGO receives discounted loans from the state to buy housing. Additionally, social workers caring for the homeless and future tenants are paid by the state. Finnish Lottery, on the other hand, supports the NGO when it buys apartments on the private housing market. The Y Foundation also receives regular loans from banks. The NGO later uses rental income to repay the loans. Yeah, so that would be another way of dealing with it. Like in my policies, I have lotteries. We're going to use lotteries. Let's use it in a way that actually makes a difference for many people, instead of just one person. Basically, I say, we cut down each lottery into $250,000 chunks, and then we dole it out to people $250,000 at a time instead of millions and millions at a time, which is ridiculous. And in this way, you can also do like they're doing, take half of whatever would be won by the lottery and just give that to NGOs and nonprofits to help deal with things like this. Good idea. We had to get rid of the night shelters in short-term hostels we still had back then, they had a very long history in Finland, and everyone could see they were not getting people out of homelessness. We decided to reverse the assumptions. That's how the Housing First concept works. The policy applied in Finland is called Housing First. It reverses conventional homeless aid. More commonly, those affected are expected to look for a job and free themselves from their psychological problems or addictions. Only then they get help in finding accommodation. Right. And that's pretty much the way it is here, which doesn't work that way. The way they can deal with addictions and other psychological problems is they have to have housing first. Housing comes first. NGO, non-governmental agency. There are basically nonprofits that specialize in helping with housing. There's some non-governmental agencies that help with getting passports for stateless persons. They're like a nonprofit that deals with the government and political issues, something like that. Result is impressive. 4 out of 5 homeless people will be able to keep their flat for a long time with Housing First and lead a more stable life. In the last 10 years, the Housing First program provided 4,600 homes in Finland, while in 2017, there were still about 1,900 people living on the streets. The program could reduce this number to less than 1,000 long-term homeless by 2019, but there were enough places for them in emergency shelters, so they at least didn't have to sleep outside anymore. Providing people with apartments is cheaper than leaving them on the street. Yep. Creating housing for people costs money. In the past 10 years, 270 million euros were spent on the construction, purchase, and renovation of housing as part of the Housing First program. However, Juha Kakinen points out this is far less than the cost of homelessness itself. Because when people are in emergency situations, emergencies are more frequent. Assaults, injuries, breakdowns, emergency room trips, right? And emergency expenditures are significantly more expensive than having a stable life. The police, healthcare, and justice systems are more often called upon to step in, and this also costs money. In comparison, Housing First is cheaper than accepting homelessness. Now the state spends 15,000 euros less per year per homeless person than before. No miracle cure, but a high success rate. With 4 out of 5 people keeping their flats, Housing First is effective in the long run. In 20% of the cases, people move out because they prefer to stay with friends or relatives, or because they don't manage to pay the rent. But even in this case, they are not dropped. They can apply again for an apartment and are supported again if they wish. Of course, there is no guarantee for success. Especially homeless women are more difficult to reach. They conceal their emergency situation more often. They live on the streets less frequently and rather stay with friends or acquaintances. Okay, there you go. There's that one. That's a good thing, and this is what we need to be doing here, well, in the United States and in every other country. I mean, we have what? For every homeless person, there is 31 places to live sitting there empty. Not that we don't have enough places to live, it's just that these people don't have access to it. That's the fundamental problem with capitalism, that there isn't any profit to be made in doing good things for the people, right? Ugh. Profit over people. All right, any questions on Housing First? Yeah, housing first with mass transportation is really kind of what needs to be done. It's hard to be, you give people access to housing, but if they can't get around, they don't have a job. They can't, if they can't get around, it's hard for them to get a job unless they have a job right nearby that they can walk to. The United States, it's going to be much more difficult to do Housing First and have it be successful without transportation. 20,000 homeless people and 61 vacant homes. Yep. Yeah, it's insane. That area there is a huge problem because of that. A lot of those read articles a few years ago talking about that exact thing, that there's a lot of a shitload of places there that are like not bed and breakfast. They're rented out as corporate temporary stay places, and what's that thing? Um, Not as permanent housing, but it's temporary housing for people who are going to pay for it. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's if you have vacant housing, your taxes should go up. I mean, if it's vacant and there's people who need a house, need a place to live, if there's any homelessness in the area, then your taxes should go up significantly. Or it should be rented to the state so that they can provide housing for someone who's struggling. They are talking about vacancy tax. There you go. Yep. Yeah, that's one way of helping to incentivize lowering rents and making sure that they are rented out. But eventually, the vacancy tax is only going to do so much. I mean, if someone has multiple houses, they can just take that as just a cost of doing business, take that as a loss for a certain amount of time, and then they wait until they can get the right person and then rent it, and then they're okay. And it's just a matter of recouping that cost over the term of how long someone is renting it. But vacancy tax should be pretty aggressive, like 10-20%. Or something like that, some significant amount of money, so that they're not going to keep it not rented out, because we need to stop homelessness, and there's plenty of places to live. There just isn't. They don't have access to them. Yeah, I don't know what the vacancy tax would look like. I have mentioned that in my policies, but I don't know how that would look yet. But yeah, that's a good way to start incentivizing them to rent it out. Okay. So yeah, as a part of housing, yeah, but the city only now is just now thinking about doing the vacancy tax. It would be a long time. Yeah, of course. And then the housing lobbyists are going to attack that, and the hotel industry is going to attack that until it's going to take even longer, and then nothing's going to be done. Yeah, I know it's going to be very difficult to get anything done because, again, people who have the money have the lobbyists. They also have the lawyers to help stop something like this to happen. As long as there's profit to be made, good things are very difficult to get done. Sad. All right, this one is short. All right, this is China Daily. Systematic test of maglev running in tube successful. So this is kind of like their Hyperloop sort of a thing in China. A model of transportation system involving high-speed maglev train running in a low vacuum pipeline. It's from the Third Research Institute of China Aerospace Science and Industry. All right, Chinese researchers have successfully carried out a systematic test on a cutting-edge transportation system involving a high-speed maglev train running in a low vacuum pipeline in North China. The test has achieved a maglev train running up to 130 kilometers per hour along the 2 kilometer test line in Yangao County of Datong, North China's Shaanxi province, according to a news release from the North University of China. This is the first time that such a transportation system anywhere in the world underwent a full-scale and full-process integrated test. A series of tests will be carried out in the future. Yeah, so China, again, is way ahead of us in tech. Groundbreaking ceremony for the planned Shaanxi Provincial Laboratory for High-Speed Maglev Vehicles operating in low vacuum pipeline and the proposed Datong test line project took place on May 24th last year. Okay, so they got, when was this written? Okay, this is the 18th. So yeah, 2021 is when they had that test. Provincial Lab is jointly built by the North University of China and the Third Research Institute of China Aerospace Science and Corp. to provide a key test platform for low vacuum pipeline magnetic levitation technology. The lab will build a full-scale 60-kilometer test track in Yangao County, with the construction to be implemented in 3 phases, which will finally achieve a maximum speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. Holy crap. The system uses the latest superconducting magnetic levitation technology to disengage from the ground to eliminate frictional resistance while employing internal pipelines similar to a vacuum to greatly reduce air resistance. Cool. And I bet you they'll be the first in the world to have one of these up and running and being used. China, so far ahead of us. Again, there's one significant advantage to authoritarianism. It's when you decide to do something, it gets done, and no one can stand in your way. Which is a pretty significant advantage. All right. I'll move this one over here at least, and let's go over here. All right, we've got Clean Technica. This is from the 19th. They got a video we'll have to check as well. Kind of see them up here, I guess. China apparently is buying up. Yeah, I heard that too. Gates as well is buying up a bunch of farmland. There's a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of different groups that are buying up farmland. I know Gates has been doing it for quite a while. But yeah, that's a problem. China owning a bunch of our farmland is problematic. That's the sort of thing that the U.S. government should be doing. Much like I've talked about, the state and the U.S. government, federal government should be buying up a shitload of farmland and paying, if not subsidizing, the farmers shifting to vertical agriculture. Taking 10% of the land, shifting to vertical agriculture, multi-story vertical agriculture, so it's protected from the from climate change, and then rewild the rest of the land as much as you can. I mean, there's going to be some places where you're going to have to, still use the agricultural land for growing stuff, but by and large, vertical agriculture is what we need to be doing. Then that'll give us more food. Instead of just having one growing season, we've got a year-long growing season. It ends up being so much better for us in the long run and protects us from the issues with climate change. Well, in the Inflation Reduction Act, they were giving farmers $3.1 billion in loan relief. Okay, loan relief is, it's something, but it doesn't actually work towards solving the problems that need to be solved with our food production in this country. I don't know. Yeah, we'd have to find a breakdown of what that 3.1 billion is, but it's not. I can't imagine in any way that it's going to be what needs to be done. Like paying farmers to not grow corn is a problem. They should be growing hemp. Paying farmers to do meat, to do cattle is a problem. Various other industries which are highly problematic that we shouldn't be doing. Okay, so it's not so bad. We are losing farmland if we do more vertical farm. Right, and the issue that why vertical farming is better is it uses 10% of the land and 10% of the water, and you get rid of all of the spraying stuff. So if you take 10% of the land and shift it all to vertical agriculture, you can produce significantly more food that's organic, and you can produce food year-round instead of just that 3 or 4 month window. And it's protected from climate change because it's inside a building. It's without doing that, we're fucked. Because climate change is coming, droughts are here. They're in certain places, the wheat is being baked right there because of the heat. So losing half the crop. So if we take 10% of the land and turn it to vertical agriculture, we can rewild the rest of it and turn it back into forest and grassland, which is, more green space, which is good for carbon dioxide sequestration. So yeah, that's definitely what we need to be doing. Without that, we have no way of ensuring that people in this country or even the rest of the world is going to have food, because the climate change is going to destroy all of our crops that are outside. And they could also be doing something like using like solar panels over farmland as a way of kind of shading it and providing some shade from the heat so that you can grow some crops under there. That'd be one way to use some of the cropland that still needs to grow stuff outside and protect it from the severe heat, because we're going to have more people. Well, yeah, part of it is that too. I mean, population is still going to go up. It's just that the rate at which we are going to be losing food production is going to go down drastically, and it's going to go very quickly. I guess I won't say quickly. Over the next decade, we're going to be losing a lot of farmland and a lot of food production because of droughts, because of flooding. It's going to destroy farmland, and there's no, unless they're vertical agriculture, protected from the environment, it's not protected from the environment. And with climate change coming, the environment, of course, is very it's radical. It's very hot, so we're getting droughts out of it, so there's not enough water, and it's baking the food right there. Or we're getting massive storms and just flooding, which washes all the topsoil away. And the global south is going to be hit with it the most, and they've got hotter weather down there, and they have lots of droughts, flooding, they've got everything. So then it really doesn't matter that China has the farmland, because that land that is true. That is true. It does matter in the sense that we can't do with it what we want because they own it, right? So at least we've lost the ownership over it. Sure, it'll become more useless as time goes on, unless they are the ones to turn it into vertical agriculture and then ship all the food over to China, which is possible, right? So they take our farmland, they do vertical agriculture or other things to grow food, and then they send it over to China to feed their people while the rest of us here end up dying. Good stuff. Yeah, exactly. And then Bill Gates is buying up a lot of it too. We don't know what he's going to be doing with it. If he had a brain in his head, he'd be doing significant levels of vertical agriculture, smart farms, stuff like that. But that's not his thing. He's into money. Whoa. Money, regardless of the cost to humanity. If I had lots of money, that's what I would be doing. I'd be setting up vertical farms. Doing vertical farms with trying to have a circular economy as much as we can. So like we have fish in there, maybe algae, mushrooms. Mushrooms are a way of recycling some of the organic waste, and using bugs as well as a way of recycling the organic waste and turning bugs and the algae and stuff and the mushrooms into food. You can also use, what else is there? Oh, seaweed and oysters. Those are some other things that we could grow in there too, because the oysters and other mussels will clean up the water, and the seaweed will also, which is a form of algae, will also help to sequester carbon. You take all that sort of stuff and then you put it into one food, like a bar made out of the mushrooms and the and the bugs and the algae and the fish and whatever food it is that you're growing there. You've got this whole nutrient dense food supply that's growing in this one area. Yes, yeah, that's right. Seaweed to feed to the cows to reduce their gas. Yes, I've read that too. That would be one way to do it. And obviously we do need to reduce how much farmland we're using for that to begin with. So I don't know what the number is, how much we need to cut that, but I mean, probably need to cut that down to at least by half. How much land we're using for cows. When does cattle use what percentage? Cultural land. So like, yeah, so here cows take up a metric shitload of land, and then the livestock feed as well takes up a shitload of land. So we need to really cut this by a significant amount. How many cows we have, and then yes, we need to feed the seaweed to the cows to reduce their methane output as well. Yeah, very good. Yeah, we can concentrate on sheep, goats, and chickens as a primary source of food while cutting this down by at least half, and then we can use the genetic engineering methods of creating food, or preferably the genetic engineered method of creating meat to help meet that need, or preferably shifting people to a more plant-based diet. Like, I had this mushroom-based burger, which was expensive as fuck, but it tasted really good. It doesn't taste like a burger, because when you're thinking about these replacement foods, don't think about it as it's going to taste like meat, because it's not going to. You need to find just something else to eat. That's the mindset you need to go into it. That is something else, something different, and it's better for you and it's better for the environment. So yeah, we need to get rid of this significantly. Like the food, okay, food we eat. There is actual farmland in here. Feed exports, wheat exports, food we eat. Okay. All right, so food we eat, wheat exports, food exports. So first, yeah, take all this, ethanol, biodiesel. Take all this. That's not a whole lot of land that feeds our entire country, right? Not including the meat. Take 10% of this and turn it into vertical farming, and then turn the rest of it into grassland or wilderness. Then you take half of this and turn this into, well, you could do vertical farming for, a small amount of it, like 10% of it, and the rest of it you turn it into forest and grasslands, and you have a crap load of carbon sequestration, and you have a significantly higher level of food production, because instead of having this area here for food, this cotton, okay, there's cotton here. All right, so here for food, and only producing food for just 3 or 4 months a year, you can have this area creating food all year round. Get so much more food out of it for the more land, for the land that we have. And fixing this problem too would be good. I'll go ahead and throw this in here for you. Should probably save this because I need this. All right. Yeah. Any other questions on that? Does that make sense? %, wheat export, 16% grain exports, 32% is livestock feed, and 20% is food that Americans eat. Okay. Yeah, we could just, oh my God, the amount of food we could make. Especially like the livestock feeds, switch that to algae like you're talking about, and we grow food year round, and we cut the amount of cows in half. Take that 10%, or even just this 20%, and grow food for just the United States and the rest of the world. But getting rid of this land and just take this 20% and just grow just shitloads of food, including the algae and the mushrooms and fish and stuff like that. And sort of as circular an economy as we have, you can have so much more green land, so much more food, so much more efficient. But it requires a much larger capital outlay, which if the federal government had their heads out of their ass, that's what they would be funding. They'd be funding that right now. All right. Any other questions, Curly Bear? Nope. Okay. All right. Aeromine rooftop wind technology outperforms solar. All right. There's a video for this. Aeromine bladeless wind energy systems are a way to generate electricity on the roof or large buildings 24 hours a day. We've covered a bladeless system before, but the efficiency is fairly low. Let's see what these guys have to say. Aeromine has created a bladeless wind energy system that harvests ambient wind currents to generate electricity. This patented technology is validated through joint research with Sandia National Laboratories, and Texas Tech University. The system is vibration-free, silent, and easy to install. Best of all, the company says it can generate up to 50% more electricity than a comparable solar array, yet costs no more than solar and uses only 10% of the available roof space. BASF is currently testing an Aeromine system at its factory in Wyandotte, Michigan. All right, we need to see a video on this. Technology leverages aerodynamics similar to, airfoils. So this is different. The previous one that I read about was electrostatic, I think. Similar to airfoils on a race car to capture and amplify each building's airflow. The stationary, silent, and durable Aeromine unit generates around-the-clock energy in any weather. Aeromine system consists of 20 to 40 units installed on the edge of a building facing the predominant wind direction. Designed to work seamlessly with the building's existing electrical system, the combination of Aeromine's wind solution with rooftop solar can generate up to 100% of a building's on-site energy needs while minimizing the need for energy storage. This is a game changer, adding new value to the fastest growing rooftop power generation market. Helping corporations meet their resilient. Blah, blah, blah. Let's just get to something that actually matters. I don't want tech speak here. Or sales speak. A small footprint. A new tool. Patent. Aerodynamic design. Amplifies building airflow in wind speeds as low as 5 miles per hour. Generates more energy in less space. So yeah, and like I talk about, we should double up on what we use our space for. So if you have solar, below that you can use something like this below it. Single Aeromine unit provides approximately the same amount of power as 16 solar panels. These systems are an effective way to harness the wind to create energy for large flat rooftop buildings such as warehouses, data centers, offices, and building. How does Aeromine? The air goes over it. Pulls. Let's see what happens here. So for the answer, we must reach back to 1738 and the theories of Daniel Bernoulli, whose work builds on Isaac Newton's second law of motion. I'm not a scientist, nor have I ever played one on TV, but I know these basic principles are what make carburetors work and allow sailboats to reach speeds of 100 kilometers per hour in a 15-knot breeze. The Aeromine technology leverages the fact that most large buildings create their own wind systems. To learn more, watch the video below. That will do. Is this technology going to replace all other renewable energy systems? Of course not. Just as you can't use your basement to create pumped hydro energy storage system. But for those cases where it is appropriate, is another tool. Let's check out this video. I can't hear. Thing turned off on me.
The ideas behind Aeromine is really about creating energy close to the use point. no complex part. We don't need advanced glass fiber build or carbon fiber or anything like that.
It overcomes a lot of the weaknesses of other distributed wind solutions, which is that it can be made large, so you can sweep a pretty large area of wind. And having no external moving parts has this advantage that you can have it resting right on a roof and have people up there doing maintenance around it safely. In the right locations with good wind resources, this is definitely an untapped market where you could be generating wind, on your building where you need it. And because we only use the edge of the building, it is completely complementary to solar PV. So if it also happens to have good solar resources, then the complement of the two is really great. As your solar falls off in the afternoon, you can maintain your power production into the evening hours with the winds. So they're sort of a natural complement.
It's also easy to transport. It comes apart very easy. It's easy to install.
It's potentially deployable to remote locations, both as recovery or as a full-time use implementation.
And I think the partnership we've had here, Sandia National Laboratories at Texas Tech University and myself, has really been a fantastic combination that really has been able us to move the technology forward and get into this level where we can now do a prototype test.
It's locations where they often already pay a high price. It's hard to get, it's often dirty, right? So shipping diesel from somewhere very far away just to burn hydrocarbons. And that's something that is kind of modular and can be brought into those environments, I think is really valuable. So it kind of solves all of the major problems of distributed wind.
Well, they didn't explain how it worked. Okay, let's go back because they showed a little bit. The wind goes through. How does it come through here? Or does this just create vortices? Okay, so it must come. It doesn't show that. It must go in here. No, because it goes up. It goes up and out. Hold on. So it comes through over here, then it comes up here. I don't get it. Bastards. Okay. Thanks for not explaining it to us. I really appreciate that. See if we can find. Here am I? Okay. Yeah, the wind should come in this way, and then the foil kind of increases the speed, maybe, then pushes it through here. Is it over here? Where? Or is it coming this way? Comes in over here. It comes in on the other side. And then this makes it go faster, creating a high pressure region. I don't know. It's not telling us. You bastards. Yeah, I don't know. I'll throw this in there so you take a look at it. It's not telling us how it's working, but it's there if you want to take a look at it. Ugh. Going. All right. Got an article here from ProPublica. Okay, let me shrink this down. From ProPublica. I've had this sitting here for a while. This is from last year. I don't remember us reading this. But let's see. Poison in the air. The EPA allows polluters to turn neighborhoods into sacrifice zones where residents breathe carcinogens. ProPublica reveals where these places are in a first of its kind map and data analysis. Whoa. All right, from the urban sprawl of Houston to the riverways of Virginia, air pollution from industrial plants is elevating the cancer risk of an whoa. In there. From industrial plants is elevating the cancer risk of an estimated 250,000 Americans to a level the federal government considers unacceptable. And when we're looking at like how we need to change businesses need to be judged and taxed and stuff like that based on how they treat humanity, how they improve the life for humanity as a whole, but also how they improve the quality of the environment. If they harm the environment, their taxes should go up and lose access to federal projects and things of that nature. So this is something that could be dealt with on a fiscal level by changing the way you do taxation. Some of these hotspots of toxic air are infamous. An 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi River in Louisiana that's thronged with oil refineries and chemical plants has earned the nickname Cancer Alley. Many other such areas remain unknown, even to residents breathing in the contaminated air. Until now. ProPublica undertook an analysis that has never been done before. Using advanced data processing software and a modeling tool developed by the Environmental Protection Agency, we mapped the spread of cancer-causing chemicals from thousands of sources of hazardous air pollution across the country between 2014 and 2018. Result is an unparalleled view of how toxic air blooms around industrial facilities and spreads into nearby neighborhoods. And that. Okay, I'll go ahead and share this for you. All right, we'll get to this next. Let's get through this. At the map's intimate scale, it's possible to see up close how a massive chemical plant near a high school in Port Neches, Texas, laces the air with benzene, an aromatic gas that can cause leukemia, or how a manufacturing facility in Newcastle, Delaware, for years blanketed a daycare playground with ethylene oxide, a highly toxic chemical that can lead to lymphoma and breast cancer. Our analysis found that ethylene oxide is the biggest contributor to excess industrial cancer risk from air pollutants nationwide. Corporations across the United States, but especially in Texas and Louisiana, manufacture the colorless, odorless gas, which lingers in the air for months and is highly mutagenic, meaning it can alter DNA. I bet you each of these states, Texas, Louisiana, are conservative. In all, ProPublica identified more than 1,000 hotspots of cancer-causing air. They are not equally distributed across the country. A quarter of the 20 hotspots with highest levels of excess risk are in Texas, of course, because why wouldn't they be? And almost all of them are in southern states known for having weaker environmental regulations, of course. Census tracts where majority where the majority of residents are people of color, experiencing about 40% more cancer-causing industrial air pollution on average than tracts where the residents are mostly white. Yes, as we're talking earlier, the systemic and structural violence inherent to capitalism, but also specifically to climate change and pollution. Predominantly black census tracts, the estimated cancer risk from toxic air pollution is more than double that of any majority white tracts. Let's see, a picture here. Union Carbide Corporation, a subsidiary of the Dow Chemical Company in Seadrift, Texas. Dow is the single biggest contributor to hotspots of toxic air pollution in the nation, according to our analysis. Holy shit in a box, they should be taxed the shit out of. Pretty picture, though. Very well done. After reviewing ProPublica's map, Wayne Davis, an environmental scientist formerly with the EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, said, the public is going to learn that EPA allows a hell of a lot of pollution to occur that the public does not think is occurring. Our analysis comes at a critical juncture for the fate of America's air. After decades of improvement, air quality has, by some metrics, begun to decline. In the last 4 years, the Trump administration rolled back more than 100 environmental protections, including 24 air pollution and emission policies. I think Biden repealed his repeal, I guess, for most of these. I think. The EPA says it strives to protect the greatest number of people possible from an excess cancer risk worse than 1 in a million. The risk level means that if 1 million people in an area are continuously exposed to toxic air pollutants over a presumed lifetime of 70 years, there would likely be at least 1 case of cancer on the top of those from other risks people already face. According to ProPublica's analysis, 74 million Americans, more than a fifth of the population, are being exposed to estimated levels of risk higher than this. Yikes. EPA policy sets the upper limit of acceptable excess cancer risk at 1 in 10,000, 100 times more than the EPA's more aspirational goal, and a level of exposure that numerous experts told ProPublica is too high. ProPublica found that an estimated 256,000 people are being exposed to risks beyond this threshold, and that an estimated 43,000 people are being subjected to at least triple this level of risk. Still, the EPA sees crossing its risk threshold as more of a warning sign than a mandate for action. The law does not require the agency to penalize polluters that, alone or in combination, raise the cancer risk in an area above the acceptable level. Yeah, and that's pretty much part of the problem. The law is like, whatevs, yo. And then the EPA keeps getting gutted and keeps not having the power it needs to do what it needs to do. Looks like right here is where it's practicing, and this is where football team practices on the field at Port Neches Groves High School near 3 facilities that emit cancer-causing chemicals, including benzene and ethylene oxide. The estimated excess cancer risk in the area is pictured more than double the level that the EPA deems acceptable. Good stuff. In response to ProPublica's findings, Joe Goffman, acting assistant administrator for the EPA's Office of Air and Radiation, said in an emailed statement, toxic air emissions from industrial facilities are a problem that must be addressed. Under Joe Biden's administration, the EPA has reinvigorated its commitment to protect public health from toxic air emissions from industrial facilities, especially in communities that have already suffered disproportionately from air pollution and other environmental burdens. Well, what are you doing, and what are you doing about it instead of just talking about it? ProPublica's reporting exposes flaws with EPA's implementation of the Clean Air Act, a landmark law that dramatically reduced air pollution across America, but provided less protection to those who live closest to industrial polluters. The 1970 law resulted in outdoor air quality standards for a handful of widespread criteria pollutants, including sulfur dioxide and particulate matter, which could be traced to exhaust pipes and smokestacks all over the country, and were proven to aggravate asthma and lead to early deaths. But 187 other dangerous chemicals, now known as hazardous air pollutants or air toxics, never got this level of attention. At the time, the science demonstrating the harms of these compounds, which primarily impact people in the neighborhoods that border industrial facilities, so-called fence-line communities, was still in its early stages. The EPA did not receive enough funding to set the same strict limits. Industry lobbying weakened the agency's emerging regulations. In 1990, Congress settled on a different approach to regulating air toxics. Since then, the EPA has made companies install equipment to reduce their air pollution and studied the remaining emissions to see if they pose an unacceptable health risk. The way the agency assesses this risk vastly underestimates residents' exposure, according to our analysis. Instead of looking at how cancer risk adds up when polluters are clustered together in a neighborhood, the EPA examines certain types of facilities and equipment in isolation. When the agency studies refineries, for example, it ignores a community's exposure pollution from nearby metal foundries or shipyards. Yeah, you have to take it as a larger part of a system, not out of context. Sure, you do need to look at it individually, but you also need to look at it as a larger part of a greater system. Matthew Tejada, director of the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice, told ProPublica that tackling hot spots of toxic air will require working back through 50 years of environmental regulation in the United States and unpacking and untying a whole series of knots. Top polluters. The cancer-causing air emissions from these 5 corporations cover more populated square miles than the emissions from any other companies, according to our analysis. The Dow Chemical Company, Huntsman Corp, Eastman Chemical Company, BASF, LyondellBasell Industries. I've not heard of Lyondell, Basel, or Huntsman. Most of these companies did not comment. Eastman said, not all risk is due to industrial activity. However, we continue to do our part to reduce risk and emissions to ensure the safety of our local community. If you did, you wouldn't be on here, you asshole. The environmental regulatory system wasn't set up to deal with these things, he said. All the parts of the system have to be rethought to address hotspots or places where we know there's a disproportionate burden. Clean Air Act rarely requires industry or the EPA to monitor for air toxics, leaving residents near these plants chronically uninformed about what they're breathing in. And when companies report their emissions to the EPA, they're allowed to estimate them using flawed formulas and monitoring methods. Of course they are. These fence-line communities are sacrifice zones, said Jane Williams, executive director of California Communities Against Toxics. Before there was climate denial, there was cancer denial. We release millions of pounds of carcinogens into our air, water, and food, and act mystified when people start getting sick. The strangest thing. Brittany Madison is worried about air. Madison, who is 31, lives in Baytown, Texas, a city next to the Houston Ship Channel, where the skyline is dense with the glittering towers of chemical plants. In the apartment she shares with her 7-year-old son, her 39-year-old sister, and her nieces and nephew, the low, steady hum of air purifiers is unremitting. Her 3-year-old niece, Priya, has suffered from debilitating asthma attacks since she was born, even on good days. The family tries to keep Kira indoors as much as possible. On bad days, they shut the windows, and about once a month, they rush her to the hospital where she's given oxygen and injected with steroids. Dear God. Madison, who's 6 months pregnant, loves taking long walks and watching the kids at the playground, but lately she's been spending more and more time inside. Her home lies a few miles north of ExxonMobil Baytown complex, one of the largest refineries in the world. Over the years, Exxon's massive petrochemical operation has sent millions of pounds of toxic chemicals into the sky during accidents, unplanned discharges, and fires. ExxonMobil did not respond to requests for comment. After a particularly smoky fire in 2019, Madison came down with the migraine, her first. Her son, who didn't know the word for headache, told her that his brain was hurting. Madison began to wonder if living near all these pipes and tanks and towers had something to do with the health conditions that afflicted her neighborhood. Air toxics are associated with a host of adverse effects that range from headaches, nausea, to lung damage, heart failure, and death, and they're especially hazardous for kids and the unborn. University of Texas School of Public Health found that children living within 2 miles of the Houston Ship Channel had a higher risk of developing acute lymphocytic leukemia. Madison's father, who worked at several nearby plants, died from a heart attack at 43. Friends and family have died of cancer. You wonder what caused it. Is it the air we breathe or the food? Madison asked. There are just all these different questions that no one has answers to. Yeah, again, it's profits are privatized while the costs are socialized. And that's a large part of the problem with capitalism, because there's profit in murdering people like this and destroying their lives for profit, right? Cancer risks from industrial pollution can be compounded by factors like age, diet, genetic predisposition, and exposure to radiation. The knock-on effect of inhaling toxic air for decades might, for example, be the difference between merely having a family history of breast cancer and actually developing the disease yourself. While the cancer and asthma rates in Houston's Harris County are comparable with those in the rest of the state, Texas officials have identified cancer clusters in several of the city's neighborhoods. Large swaths of the greater Houston area make up the third largest hotspot for cancer-causing air in the country, according to our analysis after Louisiana's Cancer Alley and an area around Port Arthur, Texas, which is on the Louisiana border. For many homes closest to the fence lines of petrochemical plants in cities like La Porte and Port Neches, Texas, the estimated excess risk of cancer ranges from 3 to 6 times the level that the EPA considers acceptable. But because of the way that the EPA underestimates risk, the true dangers of living in a toxic hotspot are often invisible to regulators and residents. The department is within about 30 miles of more than 170 facilities that give off toxic chemical emissions. Okay, so I'm assuming these red ones are the ones that give off toxic, oh my God, emissions. The EPA collects data on each individual facility, but does not consider the excess cancer risk from all the facilities' combined emissions. ProPublica did. These 3 facilities account for most of the estimated industrial cancer risk on her block. Yeah, okay, so ExxonMobil here, Equistar Chemicals, and Celanese Chemicals. And she lives up here, if I get this thing to work right. The ExxonMobil refinery, less than 3 miles from Madison's apartment, churns out the heavy metals nickel, cobalt, and zinc. The refinery individually increases the estimated risk of getting cancer by 1 in 730,000. Across the bay in Pasadena, Texas, is the Celanese Clear Lake facility, which spews ethylene oxide. The plant independently increases the estimated cancer risk to 1 in 217,000. Nearby, okay, so this is 5 times greater, and this is 25%. Right? How does that work? 1s in a million and 20% higher. This one in 75% higher here and 25% higher there. I think that's the way that works. Nearby, the Equistar Chemicals plant, owned by Lionsdale Basel, also emits ethylene oxide, contributing an additional increase in estimated cancer risk of 1 in 134,000. Okay, so like 90% higher. Assuming it's supposed to be 1 in a million. When the emissions from all 3 of those facilities plus the other facilities in the area are added together, the estimated additional cancer risk on Madison's block jumps to 1 in 46,000. Fucking balls. So that's like over like 95% higher. 99.5% higher. Significantly higher. A lot higher. The agency breaks things down into the smallest possible categories to avoid addressing what we call cumulative risk, says John Walk, an attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Counsel, who formerly worked as an EPA lawyer advising the Office of Air and Radiation. But our bodies do not parse out air pollution according to the rules, the rule labels, or industrial equipment or industrial source categories. The cancer risk from each facility or type of equipment may be at levels the agency is acceptable, but taken together, the potential harms can be substantial. EPA initially sent ProPublica a statement saying that it ensures that risks from individual source categories are acceptable and that the standards provide an ample margin of safety to protect public health. But they don't. Hold on, that's... Yeah, totally not true. In another statement sent after an interview, the agency added, "We understand that communities often confront multiple sources of toxic air pollution and face cumulative risk greater than the risk from a single source. Then do something about it." The EPA added that it was working both to better harness the science on cumulative risks and to better understand risks for communities who are overburdened by numerous sources of multiple pollutants. Madison can't help but notice that when her family travels, Priya's asthma improves. "The first chance I get, I'm moving away from Texas and never looking back." She said, "I love being outside. I love seeing the stars. I don't want life to feel like someone is pumping gas into our front porch." Yeah, that's a good advice for pretty much everyone living in Texas. Unless you're a right-winger who doesn't mind dying for corporate profit, if you can leave. And that's good. We talked about the Texas seceding. Let's let Texas secede, but as a part of Texas seceding, they would have to pay for anyone who wants to leave. That way people aren't trapped there having to die for corporate profits. The locations of the hotspots identified by ProPublica are anything but random. Industrial giants tend to favor areas that confer strategic advantages. On the Gulf Coast, for instance, oil rigs abound, so it's more convenient to build refineries along the shoreline. Corporations also favor places where land is cheap and regulations are few. Under the federal law, the EPA delegates the majority of its enforcement powers to the state and local authorities, which mean that the environmental protections afforded to Americans vary widely between states. Texas, which is home to some of the largest hotspots in the nation, has notoriously lax regulations. I'm pretty sure none of us find that surprising. Between 2008 and 2018, lawmakers cut funding for state pollution control programs by 35%, while boosting the state's overall budget by 41%. According to a report by the Environmental Integrity Project, an advocacy group founded by former EPA staffers. The Texas Tribune story from 2017 found that during the prior year, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality had levied fines in fewer than 1% of the cases in which polluters exceeded emission limits. Even when penalties are issued, many polluters see these fines as part of the cost of doing business, said Craig Johnson, a former lawyer at the EPA and a professor of environmental law at Lewis and Clark Law School. Right, and that's the issue with this, right? That's just part of their overhead to making profit, paying these fines. It's not at a level where it actually matters because it's done on state and local level. It needs to be done at the federal level, where much as I say that if they pollute like that, then their taxes go up and they lose access to federal contracts and they have higher taxes and all sorts of things like that. It has to be done on a federal level. Otherwise, like you're seeing here, right-wing states are just going to let them murder as many people as they want for corporate profit, and not much is going to get done. And this is kind of one of the reasons why my policies that the natural world is a part of my philosophical pillars. Interdependence of humanity with the natural world. And these are the three most important parts of my policies right here. And protecting the natural world is very, very important. Gary Rasp A TCEQ spokesperson told ProPublica that the agency has taken actions to monitor, mitigate, and improve the air quality in fence-line communities. The agency runs dozens of stationary air toxics monitors across the state. He added, and by continuously evaluating air monitoring data, which is more accurate than modeling, TCEQ can identify issues. The agency also inspects industrial facilities and has an active enforcement program, referring particularly egregious cases to the Texas Office of the Attorney General, which, again, because their policies are so lax, it really doesn't matter. That the people living inside these hotspots are disproportionately black is not a coincidence. Our findings build on decades of evidence demonstrating that pollution is segregated. People of color are exposed to far greater levels of air pollution than whites, a pattern that persists across income levels. These disparities are rooted in racist real estate practices like redlining and the designation of low-income neighborhoods and communities of color as mixed residential industrial zones. In cities like Houston, for example, all-white zoning boards targeted black neighborhoods for the sitting of noxious facilities like landfills, incinerators, and garbage dumps. Robert Bullard, a professor of urban planning and environmental policy at Texas Southern University, has called the practice PIBBY, Place in Black's Backyard, a spin on the acronym of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Many of the neighborhoods that border chemical plants are low income and lack the same resources, access to healthcare, and political capital that the wealthier neighborhoods can bring to fight against intrusive commercial activities. In places like Baytown, working class people depend on the very companies that sicken them to earn a living. Over the years, the shadow industry can permanently impair not just the neighborhood's health, but also its economic prospects and property values, fueling a cycle of disinvestment. Industries rely on having these sinks, these sacrifice zones for polluting, said Anna Baptista, an environmental policy professor at the New School. That political calculus has kept in place a regulatory system that allows for the continued concentration of industry to sacrifice these low-income African-American indigenous communities for the economic benefit of the region or state or country. Tejada, the EPA's director of environmental justice, said that the Biden administration and the EPA are focused on confronting these disparities. Laughable. These places didn't happen by accident. Yep. The disproportionality of the impacts that they face, the generations of disinvestment and lack of access, are not coincidences. These places were created, and it is the responsibility of everyone, including government, chiefly the government, to do something about it. And a large part of the way to deal with that is to send a shitload of money to the EPA and to empower it to do what it needs to do to stop all of this and stop delegating the power to the cities and the states to do it, because they're not going to do it, especially in the South. Federal government has long had the information it would need to take on these hotspots. The EPA collects emissions data from more than 20,000 industrial facilities across the country and has even developed its own state-of-the-art tool, the Risk Screening Environmental Indicators Model, to estimate the impact of toxic emissions on human health. The model, known as RSEI, was designed to help regulators and lawmakers pinpoint where to target further air monitoring efforts, data quality inspections, or, if necessary, enforcement actions. Researchers and journalists have used this model for various investigations over the years, including this one. Okay, which is what ProPublica used. And yet the agency's own use of its powerful modeling tool has been limited. There's been a lack of funding and a dearth of resources in RSEI's more ambitious applications. Again, you got to fund the shit out of the EPA. According to several former and current EPA employees, Wayne Davis, the former EPA scientist, managed the RSEI program under the Trump administration, said that some of his supervisors were hesitant about publishing information that would directly implicate a facility. He always told us, don't make a big deal out of it, don't market it, and hopefully you'll continue to get funding next year. They didn't want to make anything public that would raise questions about why the EPA hadn't done anything to regulate that facility. Yeah, and that's the problem, right? Because they lack funding, because they keep getting gutted, because they want to privatize everything and give everything over to corporations so they can make all the money that they can, regardless of the cost in human lives. I would be more than happy to lose my job to name and shame every single fucking business that was murdering people for corporate profit. That would bring me so much joy. So much joy. So along with naming and shaming, you'd also have to publish publish the data showing how underfunded they are and how, Republicans continue to defund it, and Democrats are also part of the problem as well. So you'd have to couple the naming and shaming along with how the political environments make that possible. Nicholas Lewis, a former senior analyst at the EPA and a chief architect of the RCI model, recalled the occasional battle to get colleagues to accept the screening tool, let alone share its findings with the public. There's often been pushback from having this rich data sheet too readily available because it could make headlines, he said. What I find annoying is that the EPA has the same information at their disposal and they don't use it. If ProPublica can do this, so can the EPA. Exactly. In its statement, the EPA said that it plans to improve its approach for sharing air toxics data faster and more regularly with the public. EPA has not published calculated cancer risks using RCI modeled results, it continued. RCI results are not designed as a substitute for more comprehensive, inclusive, or site-specific risk assessments, but as a potential starting point that should only be used to identify situations of potential concern that may warrant further investigation. Indeed, our map works as a screening tool, not as a site-specific risk assessment. It can be used to tie individual cancer cases to emissions from specific industrial. Thanks for the stream today. Okay. Yeah. Have a great weekend. Drive carefully. Hope you have a lot of fun with your grandbabies. I have to get done too here in a little bit. So thanks for stopping by and listening. Thank you for gifting me with your time. Enjoy your weekend with your family. Thank you. I'm not sure how much I have left of this. Okay, I guess we'll call it good here too. There's a lot here. Yes, thank you, Girly Bear. Have a great weekend, and everyone else. If you have any questions, I'm not gonna read the rest of this because we're at my 5 o'clock mark. Thank you all for gifting me with your time. I really do appreciate it. Everyone have a great weekend and drive carefully, stay COVID free, and we'll see you guys next week as well. Bye bye. See if my stuff actually works.